Hey there, curious minds. Tonight, we're diving deep into the story of a boy who tuned the world before he could spell bard. You open your eyes to the flicker of firelight dancing against the cool marble walls of ancient Thrace. You're sitting in the corner of a modest house, half reed, half myth, watching a tiny boy pluck at what appears to be an animal gut stretched across a tortoise shell. The notes wobble out like uncertain birds taking flight, but the boy's face is pinched in absolute concentration, as if he's unlocking a secret no one else can. Here, his name is Orpheus. No, not the tragic romantic yet, just a kid. Just a boy obsessed with what things sound like when they are scraped, plucked, tapped, or whispered against the wind. While other children are out trying to sword fight tree branches or chase wild pigs for fun, Orpheus is crouched beside water, throwing pebbles in and measuring the plunk against the ripple. He isn't raised by shepherds or warriors or even your average parental demigods. His mother, Calliope, happens to be the muse of epic poetry. So, no pressure. She speaks in rhymes on purpose and critiques bedtime lullabies for their lack of proper meter. The kid doesn't have a chance to be normal. While you were banging on pots as a toddler, Orpheus was being taught by divine forces how to hum with harmonic tension. Rumor says he once cried because a crow interrupted his melody. Not because he was scared, because it was off-key. Quick favor. Before you dive into full-on relaxation mode, consider liking and subscribing. It helps more than you know, and I genuinely appreciate it if you do. If not, no worries. I'm just glad you're here. Let me know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is in your part of the world. Wherever you are, I'm glad you're here. Let's take a moment to leave the noise of the day behind. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You move forward in time slightly. Orpheus is older now, maybe 8, maybe ageless. It's hard to tell in these stories. He's built himself a crude xylophone out of river stones and fallen bronze. You sit beside him and watch as he gently taps one, then another, then furrows his brow and swaps them around for better pitch. A breeze cuts through the trees and he freezes, not out of cold but curiosity. He's listening to the leaves rustle and trying to match it. Not echo it, match it. He believes every sound has a mirror waiting to be found. There's a fringe theory among some modern acoustic engineers that early mythic music, like Orpheus's, was a form of sympathetic resonance, almost like pre-scientific tuning forks. They'll say his skill wasn't supernatural. It was just extremely sensitive pattern recognition. That's a polite way of saying he was a total sound nerd. He's not interested in crowds yet. He plays for birds, for wind, for dew settling on moss. He gets into trouble for humming during offerings, for tapping drum beats on temple walls, for correcting the chant of the high priest by accident. It's not defiance, it's precision. Historians still argue whether his obsessive attention to auditory detail was learned or divine. Maybe he was born like that. Maybe the universe whispered to him and he just whispered back, in tune. One time you see him stringing up vines between trees and plucking them with a feather. You ask what he's doing and he answers without blinking, tuning the forest. And sure, maybe that sounds like a poetic tantrum, but 5 minutes later you realize the birds have gone quiet. The wind's humming in the same key as his vines. It's subtle. It's spooky. It's kind of amazing. As he grows, he starts collecting sounds like treasures. He knows the chirp of each frog along the riverbank, the way goat hooves sound against gravel, the specific rustle of a laurel leaf in autumn. His mind catalogs the world by tone and rhythm. Even his footsteps begin to fall into odd, melodic patterns. Some locals think he's weird. Others swear their headaches go away after hearing him hum near a well. He doesn't notice the attention yet. He's too busy fine-tuning the echoes inside a cave to see the group of shepherds slowly approaching to listen. And listen they do. Soon, people are showing up just to sit near him as he plays aimless lullabies to the trees. Not because he asks them to. He's still just a boy. But because they feel better when they do. Like the world makes a little more sense afterward. There's a curious fact from one dusty corner of history that claims Orpheus once made a snake curl up and nap in the middle of a sunbeam just by plucking 3 notes. Another says he could quiet a screaming baby faster than its mother. One tablet even refers to him as the boy who played the sleep into the world. By age 12, or maybe 12 in immortal child years, he starts combining notes that don't traditionally belong together. Dissonance. But he leans into it, finds tension, then gentles it. It's not always pretty, but it's intriguing. One village elder complains that Orpheus's new song gave her goosebumps in the wrong season. Another swears he heard a mountain echo it back, then sigh. You stay with him into the cool evening. He's lying in the grass holding his lyre, a gift from someone, maybe Apollo, maybe a doting ant. It's all myth here. He plucks 2 notes, lets the air hold them, then plucks a third and listens to the silence afterward like it's part of the composition. You realize this boy isn't trying to impress anyone. He's trying to hear the world clearly, and maybe, just maybe, teach it to hum along. You wake to the sound of feathers brushing parchment. At least, that's what it feels like. Soft, rhythmic, vaguely smug. And then you see her, Calliope. She's standing in the golden morning haze like someone summoned by a sunrise performance requirement. Not that she needs light to be impressive. She's got that, I've written 10,000 epic poems and I'm barely warmed up energy. Draped in fabric that somehow never wrinkles, she radiates a kind of maternal ambition that makes stage moms look underachieving. But she's not your average parent. She's a muse. The literal muse of epic poetry, and also the one responsible for making sure her son doesn't just grow up to play tavern tunes for goats. Calliope doesn't just hum lullabies, she narrates them in hexameter. When she speaks, it's musical but also annoyingly articulate. Like if your bedtime story had footnotes and dramatic pauses in all the right places. from the moment Orpheus is born, assuming he was technically born and not just willed into existence by a particularly romantic thunderstorm. She's shaping him to be something more. You watch her place a tiny lyre in his crib. He can't even hold his own head up yet, but she's teaching him about tempo by rocking him in 3/4 time. Instead of peekaboo, she plays Name That Bird song with him. And when he cries, she doesn't shush, she harmonizes. Her lullabies are rumored to make even insomniac centaurs drowsy. Historians still argue whether Calliope's parenting style was divine mentorship or gentle artistic brainwashing. Either way, Orpheus doesn't resist. He drinks it all in like morning dew. She tells him stories of gods and monsters, but always with a focus on rhythm. What good is slaying a hydra if your meter is sloppy? She'd murmur, straight-faced. By the time Orpheus can walk, he's already composing simple tunes on reeds and murmuring melodic versions of gossip he overhears from the servants. He doesn't just speak, he phrases. One night, you watch him sit at his mother's feet and try to mimic her tone while describing how the moonlight looked on the water. She doesn't correct him. She just smiles like a lioness watching her cub take down its first metaphor. Calliope isn't raising a bard, she's forging a legacy. Her sisters, the other muses, visit occasionally and make jokes about little Orpheus and his sonic obsessions, but you can tell they are impressed. Terpsichore tries to teach him dance once, but he ends up translating the whole routine into a soundscape instead. Cleo, the historian, insists he's going to end up skewing records because people will remember the song before they remember the facts. Orpheus, for his part, is still just a boy with bright eyes and calloused fingers. He doesn't understand divine politics or destiny yet. He just likes the way a certain chord feels in his chest. One day you find him composing a lullaby for the wind, then getting frustrated because the breeze won't stay in rhythm. You chuckle, but Calliope doesn't. She encourages him to try again. "The world will listen when you do," she says, and he believes her. There's an odd tidbit in a forgotten scroll that claims Calliope once adjusted the stars to better align with Orpheus's tuning practice. It's not confirmed, of course, but a few astronomers did note a weird, temporary musical constellation pattern one spring. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe she just wanted the night sky to hum in harmony for her son. She brings in tutors, satyrs with perfect pitch, dryads who hum in Fibonacci patterns, even a retired siren who's rebranded as a vocal coach. They teach Orpheus everything from ancient harmony to improvisational dolphin song. He absorbs it all, his little brain firing on all melodic cylinders. Sometimes he practices so long his fingers blister, but he never stops. Not even to eat unless someone gently shoves a fig at his face. But Calliope isn't just an academic. She teaches him the emotional weight of melody, that a song can cradle someone or crack them open. She tells him music is the only thing the gods envy because it moves mortals to act without orders. That line sticks with him. You hear him whisper it sometimes while tuning his lyre. One morning you see a small crowd gathered outside the home. Farmers, merchants, a couple of philosophers all sitting quietly, listening to Orpheus play a piece he just titled Waking with Rain. It's not polished. It's not even consistent, but it's beautiful. Calliope stands to the side, arms crossed, eyes moist with a pride she'll never admit to out loud. There's a faint rivalry developing between Orpheus and the natural world. He wants to out-hum the bees, to outsong the waterfall, not because he's arrogant, he's still too young for that, but because he genuinely believes he can join the choir of the world if he finds the right note. You think he might be close. At night, while most kids his age are dreaming about cakes or monsters, Orpheus dreams in reverb. He hears melodies in his sleep and wakes up trying to play them. Some days it works. Other days he just stares at his fingers like they betrayed him. Calliope never comforts him directly. She simply sits nearby and plays the same melody in reverse, letting him discover something new in the mistake. You notice that time doesn't quite move normally around them. Hours stretch like molasses when he's composing, and seasons seem to drift based on his emotional key. Once, he plays a haunting minor scale that makes the sun dim slightly for a few minutes. No one panics. They just pull their cloaks tighter and listen. Some fringe theories, mostly ignored by mainstream scholars, suggest Orpheus and Calliope once created a song so precise it momentarily aligned the heartbeat of every living creature within a 3-mile radius. Unprovable, obviously, but it's the kind of thing you wouldn't put past them. Calliope does one day warn him, gently, that his gift, if mishandled, could become manipulation, that harmony and control are cousins who shouldn't always share a bed. Orpheus nods, half understanding. His music has power, and power hums with potential consequences. You leave them that evening in the glow of a fireside duet. Calliope's tone rich and ancient, Orpheus's clear and reaching. They're not just playing, they are conversing in a language older than war. And somewhere in the branches above, even the owls stop to listen. You blink and find yourself deep in the woods, somewhere between dream and folklore. The trees here lean in like eavesdropping librarians, and the underbrush smells like wet thyme and something vaguely fermented. You hear a cackle, followed by an offbeat thump-thump-thump rhythm that sounds like someone trying to teach a goat to drum. That's when you spot them, satyrs. Horned, hairy, perpetually half-dancing and entirely too enthusiastic. And at their center, slightly bemused but thoroughly intrigued, stands Orpheus. He's older now, lean, wiry, and glowing with that strange calm energy that comes from being very good at something you still don't fully understand. You get the sense Calliope sent him here on purpose. Go, she probably said, learn rhythm where it grows wild. And wild is the only word that fits this place. The satyrs don't follow rules. They stomp when they feel like it. They slap tree trunks and rattle bones and play flutes carved from questionable materials. One of them teaches Orpheus how to make a drum out of stretched lizard skin and a hollow log. Another shows him how to turn hiccups into harmony. Historians still argue whether this woodland percussion school actually existed, or if it's a metaphor for Orpheus's adolescent experimentation with chaos. Either way, he's clearly having the time of his mythic life. You watch him sit cross-legged in a ring of dancing satyrs, his lyre on his lap, and his fingers twitching as he tries to keep up. They throw rhythms at him like snowballs, unexpected, irregular, impulsive. He catches some, misses others, laughs when he does, but then something changes. He starts adapting, matching footfalls to his chords, rapping wild beats with soft harmony until the whole thing starts to feel strangely organized. It's not discipline. It's not even melody, it's groove. There's a satyr named Bromeo who plays rhythm so fast it sounds like he's glitching through time. Orpheus tries to imitate him and nearly sprains a wrist. But instead of giving up, he borrows a piece of Bromeo's rhythm and stitches it into a lullaby. The result makes two rabbits nap instantly and one tree lean a little closer. This place is louder than anything he's used to, but also freer. Here, it's okay to make ugly sounds, to miss a note and turn it into a new pattern. The satyrs teach him that rhythm isn't about perfection, it's about presence. About finding the heartbeat underneath the noise. You see him dance for the first time, not graceful but honest, like his feet are arguing with gravity in 7/8 time. One satyr, toothless and vaguely prophetic, tells Orpheus that music is the only true language of animals. Not the barking or meowing kind, he rasps, but the kind that knows when a fox is lonely or a deer is remembering something sad. Orpheus doesn't fully get it, but you do. A few minutes later, he plays a short, mournful trill on a reed flute, and somewhere in the distance, a lone wolf howls, not in anger but acknowledgement. You notice Orpheus starting to build little sonic sculptures. He stacks loops of rhythm with tiny melodic sprinkles and pauses that feel like they're holding their breath. One satyr calls it musical weaving. Another, less poetically, calls it good party noise. Either way, Orpheus is experimenting, not composing in the formal sense, but discovering how chaos can be guided, not controlled, just nudged. There's a quirky old scroll buried in the ruins of a forgotten shrine that describes Orphic forest spells made entirely of rhythm, patterns that could cause flowers to open early or lull bees into brief, peaceful naps. Most academics dismiss it, but in this moment, watching him play under the moon with satyrs pounding back up on tree roots, you're not so sure it's myth. One night, during a particularly rowdy jam session involving hollow gourds and what may or may not be enchanted mushrooms, Orpheus accidentally invents something that sounds suspiciously like jazz. The satyrs go wild. One climbs a tree just to applaud with both hooves. Orpheus laughs, panting, and plays it again, but softer, more deliberate. You hear the echo bounce off the hills, syncopated and sly. It's messy and perfect. He starts to understand something deeper here. That music isn't just built, it's grown. Like a vine curling toward sunlight, each note reaches, stretches, stumbles, and finally settles. His compositions become stranger, more layered. He starts leaving space in them, tiny silences that feel intentional. You realize he's beginning to appreciate stillness as much as sound. That maybe he's starting to compose not just for the ear but for the breath between beats. A few of the satyrs suggest he stay permanently. You're weird like us, they argue, but prettier. He considers it, for a minute, but there's something tugging at him. A feeling that these rhythms, as much as he loves them, are pieces of a larger harmony he hasn't found yet. So he hugs them, awkwardly, promises to visit, leaves behind one of his early compositions scratched into birch bark, which the satyrs promptly turn into a drinking song. You step out of the forest with him, both of you smelling like campfire and tree sap, and realize something's changed. He's not just playing notes anymore. He's building atmospheres. Some fringe theorists believe Orpheus's time with the satyrs was the origin of trance music, the idea being that looping rhythm plus subtle melodic evolution equals temporary consciousness alteration. No one agrees, but it does explain why goats occasionally sway when exposed to certain types of experimental lyre playing. As you and Orpheus return to the edges of civilization, you see him dragging a few new instruments, makeshift drums, rattles, a gourd with holes that sounds like wind over a canyon. He's smiling, a little tired, but buzzing with new ideas. And as night falls and crickets start chirping, he hums along, not to lead, not to silence them, but to join in, imperfect and joyful. The first amphitheater you visit with Orpheus isn't much, just a sunken patch of stone with some mossy benches and a crumbling column that leans like it's trying to eavesdrop. Still, it's a space meant for sound, and Orpheus treats it like a temple. You can tell he's nervous. His fingers twitch, his breath hitches, and even his usually cocky lyre seems to be holding its strings a little tighter. But this is the next step. Forest rhythms and maternal lullabies were safe spaces. Now it's time to see what happens when strangers listen. Calliope is there, sitting in the shade like she's not watching, but she's totally watching. A few of the satyrs showed up too, probably more for the free figs than the music, but still, it counts. The audience is small. Farmers, travelers, two philosophers locked in a passive-aggressive staring contest, and a dog who may or may not be a demigod in disguise. Orpheus steps up and begins to play. The first song is delicate, a soft arpeggio that sounds like wind through barley fields. It doesn't ask for attention. It lures it gently, like someone pulling a string attached to your chest. You feel your shoulders drop without realizing it. Someone in the third row sniffles quietly. The philosophers both blink at the same time, which feels statistically unlikely. Orpheus plays 5 songs that day. One in honor of the moon, which causes 2 doves to land nearby and just stay there. One for the sea, which makes a retired sailor start weeping into his bread. One inspired by a joke a satyr told him, which somehow manages to be both hilarious and deeply nostalgic. By the end, no one claps, not because they don't want to, but because no one wants to break whatever spell has been laid over the place. Historians still argue whether Orpheus's first amphitheater set really caused two trees to grow toward each other slightly. The trees are real, the lean is measurable, but the timing is fuzzy. Fringe thinkers say it's music memory embedded in the wood grain. Mainstream scholars roll their eyes and blame natural curvature. You, however, were there. You saw it. Word spreads quickly, like a hymn no one remembers learning. Within a week, Orpheus is being asked to perform at weddings, festivals, funerals, and even one strange contract negotiation between feuding cheese merchants. He says yes, because he doesn't know how to say no yet, but it wears on him. You notice the bags under his eyes, the way his fingers flex even when he's not playing. He's becoming a phenomenon, and he has no idea what to do with that. A woman approaches him after one performance, tears still streaking her face, and whispers, "You made me remember my grandmother's perfume." Another man tells him, "I just forgave my brother because of that third chord." One goat refuses to leave his side for 3 days. It's all very flattering and exhausting. He starts to realize something. His music doesn't just entertain, it reveals. It cracks people open. Sometimes that's beautiful. Sometimes it's terrifying. You witness a wedding derailed when the bride hears a melody that makes her realize she's still in love with someone from her childhood. Orpheus is mortified. The guests are confused. The cake melts in the sun while everyone quietly reevaluates their emotional lives. There's an odd tidbit in a temple ledger from that time, one that mentions an Orphic tax levied on amphitheater performances because the city couldn't keep up with the post-show therapy requests. This probably didn't last long, but it gives you an idea of how potent his performances were. Eventually, someone offers him a fancy tunic and says he should go professional. He declines, says music isn't something to be branded. Then he walks off into a vineyard and doesn't come back until dawn. You follow him through those nights when he plays just for himself, testing how quiet a song can be before it disappears. One melody, you swear, was composed entirely from the sound of regret and distant thunder. Still, the performances continue. He gets better at pacing himself, at managing the emotional fallout. But sometimes the weight of his own gift bends his posture. He's not a god. He's a mortal with divine volume. That's a dangerous balance. You're there when he tries something new. A duet with a woman named Ione who plays the panpipes with unnerving calm. Their harmony is breathtaking. People don't just cry, they collapse. One man claims to have briefly seen his past lives. Another swears his corn tastes sweeter after listening. Ione vanishes afterward, back to her coastal village, but the memory of their one performance becomes legend. Some say it was too much beauty for one place to hold. Others think Orpheus wasn't ready to share the stage yet. Historians still argue whether that performance ever actually happened. No records remain except a broken reed and a cave carving that might depict the two of them playing under a full moon. But again, you were there. You remember the hush, the flickering torches, the way your heartbeat synced with the melody without permission. Orpheus tries writing down some of his songs, but they never read the same. Notes on parchment feel sterile. The magic, it seems, lives in the moment, the breath, the tension, the space between audience and string. He begins to worry that one day he'll lose the ability to translate feeling into sound. That fear becomes a song too. A minor key waltz that makes birds land with their heads tilted like they're trying to understand heartbreak. One late summer evening, he plays for a group of children. He makes up silly verses, adds absurd sound effects, and even mimics a donkey mid-melody. The laughter is real, loud, free. And for the first time in weeks, he laughs too. It reminds him that not all music has to wound. Some of it can heal before the hurt even starts. You leave the amphitheater that night with his tune stuck in your head. A soft, looping melody that feels like exhaling after holding your breath too long. And Orpheus, exhausted and smiling, looks up at the stars and says, "Maybe tomorrow I'll try silence." You're walking with him through a market square, the kind that smells like honey, figs, and too many opinions shared too loudly. There's lute music floating from a nearby stall, slightly out of tune, and vendors shouting things like, "Try this for your goats," or "Cures heartbreak and rashes, same potion." Orpheus seems distracted, humming under his breath as he turns a peach over in his hand like he's auditioning it for a role in a poem. Then everything stops. You don't hear it at first, you feel it. A change in the air pressure. The kind of stillness that warns you a storm is about to offer its opinion. And there she is, Eurydice. She isn't glowing, not in the magical nymph sense. She's just vividly present, like the world has suddenly gone from charcoal sketch to oil painting. Her hair's wind-tangled, her sandals are uneven, and she's laughing at something a child just said. It's not a performance. It's the kind of laugh that lives in the body for days after it's left the mouth. Orpheus doesn't move. You actually have to nudge him. He mutters something like, "Oh no," which is exactly what someone says when they've just met a person who's going to ruin their plans forever in the most beautiful way. Historians still argue whether she was a dryad, a mortal, or some unique combination of muse and mystery. But to Orpheus in that moment, she is sound and silence, rhythm and reason, and everything he's been chasing in his music without knowing it had a name. He introduces himself awkwardly, trips on a cobblestone, nearly drops the peach, fumbles his way into a smile that is, shockingly, enough to make her stay. They talk. You can't hear all of it because the world starts to blur around the edges, like even reality is trying to give them some privacy. Later that evening, Orpheus writes a song, just one. It's simple, 4 chords, a melody that curls like steam from warm bread, and lyrics that don't rhyme but somehow feel perfect. When he plays it for you, you actually forget what your own name is for a second. It's the kind of music that makes you believe in things like fated meetings, soul echoes, and the possibility that two people can find each other in a noisy world and still hear nothing but each other's heartbeat. You notice something different about him. He's softer now. Not weaker, just less defensive. Like loving her has smoothed down some of the sharpness he used to wear like armor. He still performs, still explores, but now the music has a tether, a center. It returns to her the way rivers return to the sea over and over without complaint. They go walking often through fields, along rivers, up rocky hills where they can lie back and make jokes about the shapes of the clouds. You follow them sometimes, just to see what joy looks like from the outside. One afternoon, you watch him braid flowers into her hair while humming what sounds suspiciously like an early prototype of elevator music, but warmer, slower, less intrusive, like he's trying to invent background music for shared peace. Fringe theorists point to this era as when Orpheus began experimenting with ambient intention in music. That is, creating sounds that gently affect mood without demanding focus. Some say these were the earliest seeds of what modern lounges would eventually co-opt and soften beyond recognition. Others argue he was just in love and wanted the air around her to sound as lovely as she looked leaning against a tree. Either way, something is shifting. The music isn't about performance anymore. It's about presence, about creating space for someone else to breathe inside your melody. You watch him adjust his playing to suit her moods. A little faster when she's restless, softer when she's tired. Sometimes he doesn't play at all, just listens to the way she hums while braiding herbs together. One evening they find a circle of standing stones. Not famous, not magical, just ancient and curious. Eurydice starts dancing between them, laughing, making up a song about misbehaving goats. Orpheus joins in with a tune so light it barely touches the earth. It's nothing serious, nothing sacred, but it's perfect. The kind of moment that feels like it exists outside of time, as if the sun might just choose not to set so they can keep laughing longer. He begins composing more songs like that, whimsical, intimate, slightly ridiculous. One involves a beetle who falls in love with a firefly. Another's about the philosophical implications of a grape that rolls off the table, but they are also sincere. Deeply so. He's not mocking joy, he's honoring it, and that's new. You overhear her once telling a friend, "When he plays for me, it feels like even my mistakes make music." And you understand then that this isn't just about sound, it's about acceptance, the kind you can't fake or perform your way into. Historians still argue whether Orpheus's love songs were ever documented in official temple scripts or simply passed down through memory and heartbeat. Some texts claim the melodies vanished the moment he stopped playing them. Others say the songs live on in certain bird calls and the way river water sounds just before dusk. You don't need proof. You remember the songs. You remember her. One morning they lie in a patch of sunlight, half asleep, and he plays something you almost can't hear. It's so gentle you wonder if it's just the sound of her breathing translated into chords. You lean in, and that's when you realize he's written a song too perfect for this world, too tender, too balanced on the edge of loss, the kind of beauty that makes the gods jealous, the kind that can't last. You say nothing, neither does he, but both of you feel it. that breathless ache tucked inside the joy, that quiet knowledge that nothing this lovely ever stays untouched for long. So you let the moment stretch, let the melody wrap around you like dust-colored silk. Let them laugh again just once more, before the song finishes and the silence afterward becomes its own kind of music. It starts as a wedding, a small one by ancient standards. No flaming bulls or golden apples, just olive wreaths and lyre strings stretched tighter than usual. You're there, standing beside him as he adjusts his tunic for the 50th time. His hands tremble not from nerves, but from the weight of hope. Eurydice is radiant, wearing laughter like it's stitched into her skin. And the music sounds like home. The ceremony drifts by in a blissful haze. There's dancing, clapping, people pretending not to cry into their wine. Orpheus plays a new composition, one he only lets her hear the final verse of, right there in the middle of the celebration. She laughs, then presses her forehead to his, and for one long second even the gods pause to listen. And then she runs. Not away, just across the clearing, chasing after a girl who'd lost her sandal. A funny little moment, the kind that feels like nothing until it isn't. A snap, a hiss, a silence sharper than any sound. You hear it before you see it. The abrupt absence of music, the gasp that follows. Eurydice stumbles, then collapses. No poetry to it, no drama, just a body folding into the grass. You and Orpheus are both running before your thoughts can catch up. The serpent's already gone. All that's left is the small, perfect wound, and her mouth shaped into an unfinished word. He drops beside her, tries to sing anything. A healing hymn, a charm, even the first song he ever wrote for her. But the music won't come. His voice shakes, breaks, stops. You feel the silence rush in like cold water, numbing everything it touches. Historians still argue whether Eurydice died instantly or lingered long enough to hear his voice one last time. Some say the gods gave her 3 extra breaths out of pity. Others believe that moment stretched into eternity inside his heart. But you remember, her fingers twitching once. The look in his eyes, like the universe had just stepped on his soul without realizing it. The mourners arrive too late to matter. They say things like how tragic and so young, and the gods have their reasons. You want to scream, but there's no room for sound in this grief. Orpheus doesn't speak, doesn't cry, just carries her gently to a grove they once danced in and sits beside her body until the stars blur. That night he plays nothing, and the world notices. The birds go quiet, the rivers slow their song, even the wind seems too respectful to hum. The lyre sits untouched beside him like a soldier waiting for orders that'll never come. You stay with him even though he doesn't acknowledge you, for days, then weeks. He barely eats, doesn't sleep, only stares at the spot where she once smiled at him. The once famous melodies have all vanished, like they were ashamed to exist without her. A fringe account in a lost text claims that during this silence, crops wilted faster and lovers quarreled more. That without Orpheus's music balancing the emotional frequencies of the mortal realm, things just tilted. Mainstream historians roll their eyes, of course, but they can't deny there's a strange gap in the record from this period, like a skipped heartbeat in time. You hear whispers of Hades, of the underworld, of impossible paths. And slowly, Orpheus begins to look downward instead of forward. He doesn't say it out loud, but you know what he's planning. And honestly, it terrifies you. Not because of what he'll face, but because of what he's willing to become in order to get her back. He sharpens his resolve like a blade, starts writing again, not songs for comfort, but spells made of sound. Music not for joy, but for permission. You see pages filled with strange notations, rhythms that feel like footsteps down a tunnel, chords that hang heavy like wet stone. He's composing his descent. One night, finally, he plays again. Just a single note, but it's enough. The ground itself seems to shudder in acknowledgement. And then he stands, wraps the lyre in cloth, and says softly, "She's waiting." No tears, no speeches, just that. And off he goes, walking toward the mountain with the kind of quiet that means everything hurts too much to speak about. You follow, of course, through dead forests and silent fields, past villages too scared to ask questions, into caves where the air forgets how to be warm. Every step down makes the world less colorful, less noisy, less kind. And still he walks. There's a legend that says 3 vultures flew overhead as he passed into the caverns, then turned to stone mid-flight. Another says that when he crossed the last threshold, time hiccuped, and 100 clocks in different temples stopped ticking at once. You don't know if those are true, but you do know this: when he finally enters the underworld, even the shadows flinch. And down there, under layers of silence and sorrow, Orpheus does something unthinkable. He begins to play, not loudly, not defiantly, just a quiet song filled with every loss he's ever carried. Every note is a question, every pause is a prayer. You watch as the music threads through the gloom, touching shades, curling around forgotten memories, making even the Furies lean in. This is no concert. This is confession, a melody so full of longing that it becomes a map of everything he's willing to give up to hold her hand again. You've heard him play joy. You've heard him play laughter, mischief, grief. But this is the sound of a soul trying to reverse gravity, to unring the bell of fate. And somewhere deep below, a door begins to open. The underworld isn't just dark, it's layered, thick with ash-scented air and the sort of cold that doesn't touch your skin. It settles in you, like you're part of a sad story someone keeps rereading. The path isn't marked, but Orpheus doesn't hesitate. He walks as though the grief itself is guiding him. And it kind of is. You try to stay close, but it's hard. Not because you're scared, okay, maybe a little, but because the music he's playing pulls everything into its orbit. It's not loud. In fact, it's barely there, but it echoes in your ribs like a memory you forgot you missed. As you both move deeper, the world gets stranger. Shadows don't always match their owners. Time loops in odd stutters, like a scratched vinyl record. Some spirits just float by, mumbling lines of poetry they never finished in life. Others reach out not to harm, but to remember what warmth used to feel like. And then you hear the growl, Cerberus. the massive, triple-jawed canine bouncer of the dead. His paws alone are the size of wine barrels, and each head snarls with a slightly different emotional tone. One angry, one bored, and one that frankly looks like it's trying to do mental math. He's not just here to guard the gates. He's here to decide who shouldn't have gotten this far. Orpheus steps forward, doesn't flinch, doesn't run, he just plays. The song shifts. It softens, brightens, then dims again, like a lullaby half remembered from childhood or the tune of a music box buried in the attic. Cerberus lifts one massive paw, sniffs, and no joke, sits. All three heads, now oddly serene, tilt slightly to the side like they are watching a baby nap. You don't breathe for a full minute, one paw step at a time. You both pass. Historians still argue whether this musical pacification was a calculated manipulation or a genuine connection between artist and beast. Some fringe theories even suggest Cerberus was musically trained under Apollo himself and recognized Orpheus's lyre work as professional grade. Others point out that dogs just love a good sad song. Next, it's the judges. Three ancient, moody souls perched atop a stone dais. Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. They look like professors who haven't had tenure challenged in a millennium. Cold eyes, crossed arms, vibes like please don't make us care. Orpheus doesn't plead, he doesn't even speak. He just lifts the lyre and plays something so devastating it makes your knees go soft. It starts low like a heartbeat underwater, builds slowly, layer by layer, until the notes are carrying entire memories. The taste of peaches, the weight of silence after laughter, the way Eurydice danced between shadows and sunlight, and you see it. A single tear sliding down Rhadamanthus's cheek. Minos clears his throat 3 times. Aeacus blinks more often than a ghost should. When the final note fades, the room is stiller than death itself. Then comes the most terrifying moment, silence, followed by deliberation. The judges whisper, murmur, and at one point Aeacus dramatically throws his hands up and mutters, "Oh, just let the boy try." You suppress a nervous laugh. Minos shoots you a look that makes your bones colder. But they agree, somehow. Maybe they are moved, maybe they are bored. Maybe Orpheus has found the one universal truth of the dead, that they too wish they'd loved harder, sung more, risked something stupid for someone that mattered. The path clears. A shimmering veil lifts, and beyond it lies Persephone and Hades. You half expect thunder or a pit of fire, but the room is quiet. Hades, king of gloom and father of awkward silences, reclines on a throne of onyx and shadows. Persephone, radiant even in stillness, watches you both with something dangerously close to sympathy. She sees the lyre. She sees Orpheus's hands. And she says very softly, "Play." And so he does, but it's not a song of seduction. Not a boast, it's a confession. The music leaks from the lyre like candlelight, warm, flickering, sometimes fragile, but determined. You watch Hades's jaw tighten. Watch Persephone's gaze drop for just a second, and then something changes. The air gets heavier, but not hostile. More like the moment before a storm chooses to pass over you. Hades raises a hand and says the impossible. You may take her, but of course there's a catch. You must walk ahead, she behind, and you must not look back, not once, until you've both left this place. Historians still argue whether this condition was a test of love, a trap cloaked in formality, or simply a rule of death too old to change. Some say Hades admired the boldness but still had to obey cosmic bureaucracy. Fringe thinkers believe the rule was psychological, a way to let mortals decide their own doom. You want to protest, to say it's unfair, cruel, rigged, but Orpheus doesn't hesitate. He nods, takes a shaky breath, and begins the slowest, most careful walk of his life. You walk behind him, and behind you there's a whisper, a rustle, the softest footfall, and suddenly she's there. Eurydice. Her presence is like a breeze across your back. She doesn't speak. She doesn't need to. Her silence says it all, step by step, up the winding path, past the still judges, past Cerberus, who now gives a slow tail wag, closer and closer to the veil between worlds and the music. He's not playing now, but it's in every breath, every heartbeat, every twitch of his shoulders as he resists, barely, the urge to turn and check that she's still there. One moment he almost stumbles. You grab his elbow. He grips the lyre tighter, keeps going. And for a heartbeat, it seems like this might work. You see daylight, just ahead, the first thread of sun cutting across the stones. One more step and they'll both be free, together again, and then it happens. He pauses, just for a fraction, not even a full second, but it's enough. You see his head tilt barely. You want to scream, but you can't make a sound fast enough. He turns, and she's there, still behind him, still whole, still his for exactly one heartbeat. Then she fades, no scream, no fury, just a look of sorrow, of understanding, of goodbye, and she's gone. The lyre drops from his hand, and the silence that follows is deeper than death. There is no scream, no sob, just footsteps, soft, deliberate, wrong. You watch him stand in that space where she vanished, frozen like a statue carved from heartbreak. The stringless lyre lies by his feet, useless now, just wood and memory. You want to say something, anything, but words feel fake in a place where love just slipped through the cracks of time itself. He doesn't move for a long while, maybe hours, maybe years. Down here, time stops pretending to behave. Eventually, the torches dim and the spirits retreat, and even Cerberus looks away. Hades says nothing, his kind of mercy. Persephone bows her head, and then slowly Orpheus turns around, back the way he came, back through the quiet ash halls and silent corridors of the dead. Every step seems heavier now, like the world has tripled its gravity just for him. You follow, unsure if he even knows you're still there. But you stay. You always do. As he passes the gates, the air thins. Light returns slowly. You step into the sun again, but Orpheus doesn't blink, doesn't squint. He just keeps walking like the world no longer has enough texture to deserve his attention. The grass is greener than you remember. The birds are louder. The breeze carries warmth. But for him, it's all in grayscale. He doesn't return to the grove, doesn't go back to the town, the temple, the cliff where he first played for the sea. He heads for the hills, the wild places, somewhere high and empty, somewhere far from anything that reminds him of her footsteps. Historians still argue whether this retreat was a spiritual exile, a strategic withdrawal, or simply a man too broken to bear witnesses. Some say he went looking for another path to the underworld. Others believe he wandered on autopilot, chasing echoes of her voice through the mountains. One fringe theory even claims he tried to erase himself from all songs, and that's why so many ancient texts mention him, without mentioning how he died, as if forgetting was the last gift he gave himself. You find him days later sitting beneath a tree twisted by wind and time, his back against the bark, his eyes fixed on the middle distance like he's watching a memory that keeps refusing to fade. You hear it before you see it, the music. No strings, just his voice. He's humming. A low, circular sound, not quite a song. It loops in on itself, like the world's saddest lullaby that doesn't know how to end. It has no melody, no words, just rhythm. A soft, endless pulse. You realize it's the heartbeat he's missing, hers, still echoing through him. Eventually he rebuilds the lyre, not the old one. That's still lying in the dirt near the mouth of the underworld, feeding moss and ants. He finds bones from a mountain ram, threads them with gut string, uses wood from the tree he's been sleeping under. The new lyre sounds different, less golden, more raw. It growls when plucked, like it remembers what silence tasted like. And then, finally, he plays again, not for crowds, not for temples, just for the sky, for the rocks, for no one and everything. His music carries farther now, up cliffs, down valleys, across rivers that once ignored him. You watch as animals gather, not enchanted this time, but curious, respectful, as if they know he's not playing to impress anymore. He's playing because if he doesn't, he might collapse into nothing. There's a story that a flock of birds tried to repeat his melody one day, and the sheer sadness of it knocked them out of the air. Another tale claims a passing nymph lost her voice for a week just from listening. Fringe versions suggest the frequency of his songs began to alter the vibration of local cave crystals, tuning the mountain itself to the pitch of grief. One thing is certain, Orpheus no longer plays to move others. He plays to remember he still exists. At night, the stars seem brighter near him. Maybe because the gods are watching. Maybe because they don't know what to do with someone who dared to step into their domain and came back without a scream. You lie beside him listening, not because you need to, but because someone should. He talks less now. When he does speak, it's mostly to himself. Fragments of lyrics he can't finish. Questions without punctuation. Once he asks if music can exist in a vacuum, if a note played into silence still counts as a song. You don't answer. You're not sure it's meant for you. Some nights he laughs, but the laugh is brittle like glass under frost. Other nights he hums lullabies he never got to sing, ones that end before the last line as if he can't bring himself to finish what was meant for two voices. And you begin to notice something strange. The air near him hums even when he's not playing. Birds sing in keys that match his breath. Leaves rustle in rhythm. Streams gurgle in time with his footsteps. It's as though the world is tuning itself to his silence. filling in the gaps left by what he lost. Historians still argue whether this ambient resonance was a natural phenomenon, an acoustic fluke, or the start of a new form of music entirely. What one fringe philosopher would centuries later call resonant mourning. A frequency of grief so precise it could harmonize with reality itself. Orpheus doesn't notice. Or maybe he does, but refuses to acknowledge it. He just keeps walking, playing, sitting, humming. You start to wonder if this is the rest of the story. No redemption, no final act, just this echo on repeat. A loop of grief and beauty that drips slowly into the world, one mournful note at a time. But then something changes. One morning you wake up to find him standing, really standing, back straight, eyes alert, fingers poised. And on the horizon, a small group of travelers climbing toward him. He doesn't flinch, doesn't smile, just waits, lyre in hand. As the wind picks up and the chords he strums start to sound, almost new. You're the first to notice how the air shifts. It's subtle at first, a rustle in the trees that syncs too neatly with the tremble of Orpheus's lyre. A bird call that answers his melody on pitch, not instinct. The mountain doesn't just hear his grief now, it plays it back. You don't know how many days it's been since he last spoke, but today his silence hums louder than thunder. Then come the footsteps, not yours, not his, others, strangers. At first just a handful, climbers maybe, or wanderers who got pulled in without realizing why they changed direction halfway up a goat path. They approach slowly, some with wide eyes, others with cautious wonder. No one says anything, they just listen. The music drifts out over the cliffs like mist, and you realize somehow that it's not quite the same song you heard before. It still aches, yes, but there's something else now, a shimmer of curiosity, a hesitant kind of invitation, as if Orpheus himself is surprised to be playing again, like he's asking the world, "Are you still here?" And the wind is answering, always. The strangers sit in a rough half circle. They don't cheer, they don't cry. They simply lean in, heads bowed or tilted, as if catching pieces of a language they forgot they once knew. One child, barely more than a toddler, begins humming along without even knowing the tune. You and Orpheus both glance her way. It's the first time you've seen a flicker of warmth in his eyes in what feels like forever, and the wind catches it all. Every note, every sigh, every rustle of the crowd's breathless stillness. It carries the music further, beyond the slopes and valleys, into towns that hadn't heard a song in weeks. People miles away stop what they are doing. Bakers burn bread. Shepherds drop staffs. A goat reportedly began swaying side to side like it was slow dancing. Historians still argue whether this concert actually happened or was exaggerated by followers in later centuries. Some point to inscriptions near Mount Echo, spiral carvings etched deep into the rock which some believe mimic Orpheus's chord patterns. Others dismiss it as myth, noting the goat's name, Pinecone, shows up suspiciously often in fringe accounts of ancient musical events. Still, you were there. You saw it. Not just a concert, but a communion, not worship, not spectacle. Something quieter, deeper. You saw an old soldier lean his head on his cane and whisper, I heard this once when I was dying. You saw a merchant drop to his knees not in prayer, but because his legs just gave out under the weight of some forgotten memory the tune dragged out of hiding. And Orpheus keeps playing, not for them, not even for Eurydice, for himself maybe, or for the silence. He plays like a man trying to knit himself back together using sound and breath alone. And slowly, note by note, you feel it, the beginnings of something not quite healing, but less broken. As the sun sets, the music changes again. The tempo shifts, not into joy. Orpheus doesn't do joy anymore, but into something like peace. The kind of peace that's earned, not gifted. It's raw, weathered, but steady. Like the way waves don't stop crashing just because no one's watching. The strangers stay long after the last note fades. They murmur not to Orpheus but to each other. Small phrases passed back and forth, trying to name what they just heard. No one can. One woman calls it music for when the stars forget your name. A teen says it felt like hearing someone else's dream from the inside. You don't offer an opinion. You know there isn't one. Later that night, a group tries to leave. They make it a few feet down the trail, then stop and wander back. Not because they are lost, because they miss it already. That happens a lot now. Travelers start timing their journeys to match the music. Shepherds lead flocks nearby so their sheep can nap in rhythm. A group of exhausted students from Athens comes just to write in silence while he plays, and Orpheus allows it. He doesn't speak, but he plays. Every morning, every dusk, not a schedule, a ritual. A heartbeat slowly remembering how to beat without shattering. And here's where it starts to get weird. The music doesn't stop when he does. One evening, after hours of playing, Orpheus finally lays the lyre beside him and closes his eyes. But the melody doesn't fade. It lingers, bounces off rock, echoes in hollow logs, skips down dry stream beds. It loops, the same soft sequence over and over, like the world has learned the tune and refuses to forget it. You hear it at night, even in your dreams. The others do too. It's not invasive, not creepy, just present. Comforting almost, like an old clock ticking in the next room. Even when Orpheus isn't playing, the mountain is. Historians still argue whether this was due to acoustic quirks of Mount Echo's geology, a unique musical hallucination, or a metaphysical feedback loop caused by prolonged exposure to grief harmonic resonance. One fringe theory from a modern sound theorist suggests the frequency was so exact it rewrote part of the atmosphere's acoustic memory. Basically, the mountain got addicted to the song and started performing it solo. Whatever the case, people notice. More arrive. And soon there are too many to count. Still no one applauds. No one shouts requests. This isn't that kind of crowd. They bring gifts instead. Bowls of wild honey, hand-carved flutes, poems tucked under stones. Someone leaves a bundle of pressed flowers that spell out the word stay. No one ever takes anything back. One evening, a philosopher from the city sits down next to you and says, "He's inventing something, you know." You nod because you do know. It's not just music anymore. It's presence. Sound that cradles rather than commands. melodies designed to be background but sacred, a music that makes you feel safe just by existing alongside it. He's inventing the world's first ambient score, not for drama, not for dance, for being, for breathing. The proto-form of what centuries later will fill elevators, spas, waiting rooms, space capsules. Sounds to keep you company without demanding your attention. He doesn't know it yet, but he's rewriting the rules of listening. And the mountain listens too, always. You sit beside him as the stars climb higher. The crowd has quieted to a soft murmur. Orpheus strums a note that holds too long, like it's trying to stretch time itself. You think maybe he's done for the night. But then he plays one more chord. Simple, clean, and the entire valley sighs in harmony. You don't notice the shift at first. The days bleed together in their quiet rhythm. Sunrises glide into sunsets with the same background hum, and no one questions it. You wake to music, you sleep to music. But sometimes, when Orpheus hasn't lifted a finger all day, you realize something unnerving. The lyre is still playing. Not loud, not ghostly, just there, like breath in your ears when everything else is still. At first, you think it's a trick of memory. Maybe you've just memorized the melodies so deeply your brain fills in the silence. But then one morning, Orpheus hands you the lyre. No explanation, no ceremony. Just places it gently in your lap and walks away to sit under a fig tree, eyes closed. You hesitate, pluck a string, nothing. It sounds normal, just a dry twang of gut and wood. But the music continues anyway, around you, through you, independent of the instrument. That's when the questions start. Among the ever-growing crowd, someone proposes a theory that the mountain has absorbed the patterns so deeply, it now remembers them on its own. Another says it's divine mercy, the gods rewarding Orpheus by letting his grief echo beyond his strength. One kid says maybe the lyre got bored and started freelancing. Historians still argue whether this was the first recorded instance of naturally occurring looping sound phenomena in a non-urban acoustic environment. Others debate whether it was actually recorded at all. There are no scrolls from this period that describe the sound directly, only those spirals carved into stones, or sketches of overlapping circles in charcoal along the bark of sacred trees. One fringe thinker even claimed the mountain's rock strata act like ancient vinyl grooves. Just add wind and you get a concert. Whatever the case, the music is now bigger than the man. And you see it in Orpheus's face, the quiet ache of irrelevance mixed with reluctant relief. Because for the first time since Eurydice slipped away, he can rest. The notes don't need him. The grief keeps playing even when he forgets how. But rest doesn't mean retreat. He begins to experiment again, not with crowds or applause, those mean nothing to him now, but with tone, space, silence. He builds small stone chambers tucked into cliff faces and tests how sound bounces inside. He presses his ear to trees, feeling for the vibrations in their roots. Once he ties the lyre to a hollowed tortoise shell and leaves it on a ledge overnight to see how the stars affect the pitch by morning. A group of acolytes forms, not by his choosing, but because people can't help themselves around wonder. They call themselves echoists, not followers, listeners. They come from different places, ages, beliefs, but they agree on one thing: this music isn't about control. It's about letting go, about sitting with the thing that hurts and not making it stop, just letting it sing. You sit among them sometimes, shoulder to shoulder with a grandmother from Delphi, a teenage builder from Thessaly, a goat who may or may not be pinecone again. Everyone has a story of what brought them here: lost siblings, failed epics, abandoned prayers. It becomes a kind of open-air confession booth, but no one speaks. They just listen, and somehow that's enough. And still the music loops, not always the same. Some days it softens, barely audible, like wind through dry reeds. Other days it carries a rhythmic thump, like footsteps echoing down a hall you'll never walk again. Occasionally it glitches, repeats a phrase over and over like it's stuck in thought. You swear once you heard it hum a few bars from a sea shanty Eurydice used to sing when she watered the figs. Orpheus doesn't smile at that, but he does look at the sky a little longer than usual. Soon the echo becomes a feature of the land. Maps are redrawn with new names: Valley of the Pulse, Whisper Ridge, Cord Hollow. Pilgrims bring offering bowls not for gods but for the sound itself. You've seen them tip wine into the soil and whisper, "This is for the silence between notes." People are weird, but you get it. One musician arrives from a distant island with a proto-drum made from stretched fish skin. He listens for 3 days before daring to play along. His beats are tentative, shy, but the mountain doesn't reject him. It folds his rhythm in gently, like seasoning into stew. Others follow, flutes carved from reeds, voices harmonizing in careful layers. The music doesn't swell, it spreads, seeps into crevices, settles into roots. Not overpowering, just expanding, and it always returns to the loop. That central spiral of grief and grace humming just under the surface. If you close your eyes and lie flat on the earth, you feel it in your spine. It's no longer just a song, it's an environment, a mood with a climate, and that's when the theories really start flying. Some scholars call this the birth of passive symphonic architecture, the design of places meant to resonate with emotional frequencies. Others insist it's proto-elevator music, the earliest example of a looping, instrumental background intended not to dominate your attention, but to soothe it while you wait, not for a floor, but for a feeling to pass. One fringe academic from the future will argue that Orpheus's loop is the original soundtrack for liminal spaces, a melody meant to fill the pause between decisions. But to you, it just sounds like someone breathing who thought they'd never breathe again. You and Orpheus don't talk much anymore. Not because you've drifted, but because there's less to say. The music does the talking now, and you've become fluent in its language. You know when a key change means he's remembering her smile, when a minor chord signals the weight of what he couldn't undo, when the soft twang of an open string means maybe, just maybe, he forgave himself a little today. He begins teaching, not overtly, just gestures, examples, trials. He lets children pluck strings and watches which ones flinch when the pitch wobbles. He starts songs and lets others finish them. One day he draws a spiral in the dirt and points to the center, saying only, "Begin here." It becomes a symbol among echoists, the idea that music doesn't start from nothing. It begins at the core of something already vibrating. And one night, for the first time in what feels like eternity, he sings. Not a song for Eurydice, not a lament, just a humming line, soft and round. It weaves into the loop and doesn't break it, just folds inside like a hand reaching for another in the dark. The entire camp goes still. Birds freeze mid-call. Even the trees seem to hold their breath. You close your eyes and the echo holds you. And for one moment the grief doesn't feel endless. It feels shared. You're not sure exactly when it happens, but somewhere between the 15th song about longing and the third replica lyre made out of driftwood and goat string, it becomes clear. Grief is no longer just a personal experience here. It's become a trend. You wake up one morning and realize that everyone around you is performing sadness. Like mourning is the new toga color, and you missed the fashion memo. People arrive not just to hear the music, but to be seen hearing it. They wear long, flowing robes in shades of wet ash and storm cloud. Their sandals scuff the dirt just so. A perfect choreography of ennui. Some carry sketchbooks filled with dramatic ink drawings of wilted fig branches. Others write melancholy poems and leave them pinned to trees, signed with pseudonyms like the Mourner of Miletus or Echo 123. You can't help but roll your eyes just a little, but also you keep reading them. The thing is, Orpheus isn't trying to be trendy. He's still just one guy quietly unraveling inside his own chords. But the looped music he unintentionally created has now taken on a life of its own. It wafts into surrounding villages, carried by shepherds and wind. It's hummed absent-mindedly by children playing games that end in pretend tragedy. Oh no, Eurydice fell in the snake pit again. And slowly, it becomes something larger than loss. It becomes fashionable. Historians still argue whether this moment marks the first cultural commodification of mourning in the Western world. Some point to the spontaneous popularity of grief-themed dinnerware, black pottery etched with teardrop patterns and the occasional moody haiku. Others cite a short-lived but wildly influential sandal brand called Sorrow Steps that claim to leave tear-shaped footprints in the sand. You can't make this stuff up. Except maybe you can, because half the trends seem like satire that got too real. And yet, for every person showing off their fashionable sorrow, there are 5 who actually feel something deeper. The music triggers it in them. A memory, maybe. A cousin who never came back from sea. A parent who disappeared into the hills one winter and never returned. The sound doesn't discriminate between the genuinely heartbroken and the aesthetically anguished. It just plays. Gently, endlessly, patiently. You find yourself torn. You want to scoff at the theatrics. The woman who brought an actual urn full of rose petals and staged a symbolic burial every evening at dusk, But then one night you sit beside her and she tells you about her daughter, the one who sang to the fish and died before she ever got to see the ocean. And you realize the petals aren't for show. They are for the songs that never got sung. That's the thing about public grief. It invites performance, yes, but it also gives permission to feel, to be a little broken in front of others, to whisper pain into shared air and have someone nod without needing the whole story. Orpheus doesn't speak out against the trend, but he also doesn't feed it. He avoids the fancier gatherings, skips the candlelit performances with choreographed interpretive dance, and instead walks alone into the woods to compose quiet things. But every now and then someone follows him, not to be close to fame, but to remember what it's like to just listen. And sometimes he lets them sit nearby, no talking, just sound. The loop continues, of course. It's deeper now, layered with tones from other instruments and harmonies from visiting voices. A traveling bard from Corinth arrives with a stringed instrument shaped like a tear and calls it the pre-guitar. You think that's a stretch, but the shape is kind of catchy. A child with a nose perpetually full of beeswax plays a reed flute with such trembling sweetness that people openly weep when he solos. He doesn't notice. He's too focused on the beeswax management. Meanwhile, enterprising thinkers start bottling the air near the cave's entrance, claiming it retains the vibrational sadness molecules. One clever teen invents a slow drip water feature that echoes a single droplet against a suspended lyre string, producing what he calls artisan sorrow. You try not to laugh out loud when someone asks if they can buy too, but this is how it happens. Grief evolves, from sharp sting to shared space, from lonely cry to ambient hum, from personal ache to culture. And maybe that's not such a bad thing, because when mourning is part of the aesthetic, it doesn't have to hide. It doesn't have to be apologized for. You can wear it on your sleeve or on your limited edition, lyre-embroidered shawl. One fringe historian insists this was the prototype for every moody coffee shop playlist to come. That somewhere between Orpheus's looping chords and the soft drip of the cave water, a genre was born. Not just elevator music, but atmospheric processing scores, the stuff that fills the space between memory and action, between crying and deciding what to do next. You don't hate the theory, and neither, apparently, does the mountain, because one morning the music shifts just slightly. The loop gains a soft new layer, not a new melody but a retexturing, like the same old sorrow but now in velvet instead of raw wool. And you swear, for one fragile moment, you feel warmth beneath the ache. People start calling the place the listening vale. They build low, curved benches into the hillsides and plant sound gardens, arrangements of rocks and reeds designed to catch and shape the wind. No one speaks loudly. Even the animals have developed a kind of hushed reverence. A donkey brays once, feels self-conscious, and trots away. You find yourself relaxing more. You stop trying to interpret every note or trace every chord back to a specific heartbreak. Sometimes music is just music, and that's enough. Orpheus still walks the perimeter most evenings, tuning the air like a shepherd checking fences. You wave. He nods, No words needed. You're part of something now, not a performance, not a trend, a continuum. Grief, it turns out, is not a pit, it's a path. And the music is the lamp you carry as you walk it with others. You hear them before you see them. Faint clinks of harness bells, the soft thud of hooves on dry earth, and the distant chatter of people who don't yet know they're entering a place where music lives in the air. By the time the trade caravan crests the ridge, the listening veil has already tuned itself to greet them. The wind carries the echo of Orpheus's lute like a distant heartbeat, slow and steady. They don't arrive with reverence. They arrive with curiosity. Colorful fabrics draped over tall wagons, strange little stringed things strapped to their backs, and drums that look suspiciously like upturned baskets. They are from the east or the south, or maybe just somewhere with more spices than you've smelled in weeks. The leader, an older woman with silver coins braided into her hair, steps down, stretches, and immediately squints toward the sound. "Is that live?" she asks, and you want to say yes, but also no, and also maybe. You settle for "it's complicated." The echoists approach slowly, a little wary. Change isn't unwelcome, but it's disruptive. And the loop has a rhythm now. It cradles grief, yes, but it also orders it. Predictable sorrow is, in a strange way, comforting. So the arrival of fresh frequencies and new musical shapes sends a ripple through the soundscape. Orpheus is, predictably, nowhere to be found when they arrive. You suspect he's up in the cave again, adjusting some ancient bone and string contraption that only makes sense if you've been heartbreak drenched for a few centuries. So it's left to the rest of you to greet the newcomers, make room for their tents, and try to explain to the man with the gourd harp that no, the loop doesn't like to be drowned out. The first night, the campfire jams are tense. One of the traders tries to solo over the loop with a series of high-pitched trills that sound like an overexcited dolphin trying to start a jazz band. Another brings out an instrument that looks like a lute but weeps like a wolf when played, and not in the poetic sense. The loop doesn't exactly fight back, but it does recede, dimming itself like a polite ghost stepping out of the way. That's how you know it disapproves. But by the third night, something shifts. The traders start listening, really listening. They stop treating the loop as a musical backdrop and start treating it as a partner. One young man, barefoot, sharp-eyed, sits quietly for hours, then adds a low, single-string drone underneath the loop. And somehow it works. The tones braid together gently, like a conversation between strangers who have decided not to compete. Orpheus finally returns on the fifth day, looking sunburned and faintly annoyed. He doesn't say much, just nods at the coin-haired woman, accepts a cup of whatever smoky tea they're brewing, and listens. You watch his eyes shift as he hears the loop with its new layer. Not judgmental, just curious. Then he takes out his lyre, sits on a flat stone, and plucks a single note. The entire valley seems to lean forward. What follows is unlike anything you've heard since the early days. It's not a solo. It's not even a performance. It's weaving. Orpheus plays like a loom threading through frequencies, wrapping the loop around the foreign tones and drawing them into alignment. The traders begin to respond, but softly now, respectfully. One adds a rhythm like breath through reeds. Another offers a short melody that dances in and out like sunlight on rippling water. And the loop, for the first time, laughs. Not audibly, but you feel it. A shift in tone, a sparkle in the upper registers. It's as if the sound itself is saying, finally, someone got the joke. Historians still argue whether this was the first documented moment of musical fusion between disparate cultural traditions in ancient Europe. Some say it predates known cross-regional harmonics by centuries. Others suggest it's merely myth layered over coincidence. But the fact remains. Something new was born that night. Something that wasn't just Orpheus anymore, or the loop, or the travelers. It was a third thing, and it felt alive. The echoists adapt quickly. They create a new gathering called the Spiral Exchange. Not a market exactly, more like a sound bazaar. Instead of buying or selling, people offer rhythms, tones, and moods. You want longing in G minor, someone's got it. Need a loopable sequence for melancholy baking. There's a woman with a double-necked harp who's nailed that vibe. It's not chaos, it's curated grief. Pain, but with color now. Texture. Someone plays a duet between a shell horn and a hammered board strung with vine fibers, and you're surprised to find yourself smiling. Like maybe sorrow doesn't have to be beige all the time. Maybe it can be iridescent. The cave starts resonating differently too. The new sounds seep into the stone, adding echo trails that shimmer on cold mornings. You walk by and hear faint traces of a distant rhythm that wasn't there yesterday, as if the rock itself is learning new songs. One fringe thinker coins the term emotional layering via trade loop echo, and insists this was the prehistoric ancestor of DJ culture. Others scoff, especially those who still think the lyre is sacred and shouldn't be touched by people who didn't grow up drinking goat milk under the same constellations. But the sound keeps evolving, regardless of permission. Orpheus, for his part, doesn't lead. He listens. A lot. Some nights he plays a single note and walks away, letting others build the rest. You think it might be the closest thing to healing he's ever known. Not silence, but letting go of authorship. Letting grief become communal instead of personal. You find yourself humming one of the caravan's tunes days later, and it fits so perfectly against the loop that you wonder if it had always been meant to arrive. Like sorrow needed to travel a while before finding its harmony, and though the caravan eventually moves on, off to trade fish skin boots or thunder drums to other unsuspecting villages, it leaves behind instruments, melodies, and a deeper understanding. That grief, like music, only grows when it's shared, and the loop keeps playing. At first, it's just a twitch of the ankle. Someone standing too close to the reed player shifts their weight in time with the beat, and without realizing it, they start swaying slightly. It doesn't look like much, barely more than a breeze brushing against a person's limbs. But then it happens again and again, and soon you start seeing it everywhere. A kind of accidental choreography, as if the loop has grown legs and is gently persuading everyone else to follow along. You're not sure who starts calling it the mourner's waltz, but the name sticks. It's not really a waltz. There's no formal structure, no three-beat insistence, but it has that same feeling of gliding through something heavy, like wading waist-deep through honeyed air. It's slow. It's tender. It feels like memory wrapped in motion. The dancers don't look like dancers. They're not leaping or spinning or posing. Most of them keep their eyes closed. Their arms hover at their sides or gently reach forward, like trying to touch something that isn't quite there. It's like watching people remember how their bodies used to feel before the grief took up residence in their bones. You try it one night when no one's looking. Just you, a patch of cool moss, and the loop humming through your chest like a second pulse. You let your feet slide a little. Your spine tilt with the weight of the chord change. And something opens. A tiny doorway between stillness and motion. You're not sure if it's dance or just the body saying, "I remember." Not everyone understands. A visiting historian scoffs and calls it emotionally performative flailing. He wears a very large belt and zero imagination. But that night you catch him at the edge of the tree line, feet tapping in time. He's not ready to join, but the loop gets into your blood whether you want it to or not. Orpheus never leads the dancing, but he does adjust his rhythms, subtly. He draws out certain notes that coax the dancers forward. He shortens others that encourage stillness. It's a language now, a call and response with the body. Historians still argue whether this period constitutes the first intentional use of music to provoke synchronized movement in communal grief rituals. Some compare it to the funeral processions of ancient Egypt, others to the trance dances of early Anatolia. But nobody can deny it works. Then, one night, the tempo changes. Just a little. Just enough to make the footwork feel playful. A girl, maybe 7 years old, barefoot and grinning, starts skipping between the mourners. She loops around their slow spirals and invents her own rhythm, clapping on the off beats and humming with her whole face scrunched up in joy. No one stops her. Some smile. Some cry. One man follows her steps, mirroring her goofy shuffle like a dance partner from a parallel world. And just like that, the loop becomes alive in a new way. Not just music for sorrow, but music for release. For remembering what joy used to feel like, and daring to try it on again. Not loud joy, not wild joy, but the quiet kind. The kind that sneaks in through the back door of a funeral and leaves a flower in your pocket. The echoists begin to formalize things, not rules, rituals. They mark certain days with specific tempos. Slow Wednesdays for reflection. Stagger Step Fridays for remembering things you were too afraid to grieve the first time around. And once a month, a night of unstructured movement they call loosening. And no one speaks. Everyone moves. The loop plays its own way, seemingly without Orpheus guiding it. One fringe philosopher insists the loop has become sentient. That the constant exposure to grief, memory, and rhythm has awakened a rudimentary consciousness in the vibrations themselves. Others mock the idea, but then admit they have noticed the music changing faster than Orpheus seems to direct it. as if it's responding, growing, adapting. You find yourself dancing more often, and for reasons you can't always name. Sometimes you move because the air tells you to. Sometimes because your hands remember a gesture your grandmother used to make while making bread. Sometimes because standing still hurts more than the ache in your knees from swaying for 2 hours straight. The music has learned the difference between grief that sinks and grief that shifts, and it invites you into that shift with every measure. It doesn't force you, but it never lets you forget that movement is an option. Even the animals start joining in. A dog circles the fire pit with near-perfect rhythm, tail wagging like a conductor's baton. A raven hops along the perimeter of the gathering, bobbing its head with uncanny timing. You laugh at first, but then you realize, why wouldn't they feel it too? The loop doesn't have a preferred species. It speaks to anything that listens, and maybe that's the point. Maybe the loop isn't about tragedy anymore. Maybe it never was. Maybe it was always trying to move you, just enough to keep your soul from calcifying into stone. Orpheus still plays from time to time, but more often he just listens, watches, walks the circles the dancers carve into the soil. Some say he's trying to figure out the next layer of the loop. Others say he's waiting for it to outgrow him completely. You think he's just tired, but also strangely content. And one evening, as twilight paints the veil in soft purples and muted golds, Orpheus does something he's never done before. He dances, not for long, not well, but sincerely. And you realize this was never about inventing music that filled empty spaces. It was always about inventing music that could move through people. Music that could move people, literally, metaphorically, spiritually. Silly lie, and now you can't hear the loop without moving. Even if it's just your fingers tapping your leg in time, even if it's just your breath adjusting to its rhythm. The loop has legs now, and it's dancing with you. You notice it one morning, when the mist hasn't yet burned off the hills and the loop is humming low like a cat dreaming in the sun. Orpheus is sitting by the water, his lyre in his lap, plucking absent-mindedly. But it doesn't sound the same, not entirely. The tone is richer now, almost like it's playing more than one note at once. You get closer, squint, and realize the frame has changed. Slightly longer. A new arch carved along the top, delicate as a fingerprint on old glass. You ask him about it. He shrugs, half smiles, and says, "The wood wanted more room," which isn't helpful, but also kind of is. Later that day, you inspect the instrument more closely. It's not just the frame. There are new strings, thinner, spun with something that glints like spider silk under torchlight. You ask one of the echoists, who tells you in a hushed voice that Orpheus found them in a cave wall, wrapped around a fossilized rib cage, which raises more questions than answers. But you're starting to learn that questions are part of the song too. He never announces the changes. He just plays them into being. Each new modification subtly shifts the loop's tone palette. What used to be a steady drone becomes a cascade of shimmering overtones. Certain notes now ripple outward with a harmonic tail, like water disturbed by thought instead of touch. People begin to say the music remembers things that haven't happened yet. You laugh until it starts to feel true. A child hears the lyre one evening and says, "That's the sound my sister made when she was born." She's an only child, and nobody corrects her. The lyre becomes a mystery inside the loop, not just a tool, but a participant. Historians still argue whether this evolution was intentional craftsmanship or emergent magic. Some suggest Orpheus began embedding emotional resonances directly into the frame, like a proto-memory archive woven from melody. Others think the loop itself taught the lyre to be more than it was. A partnership between object and echo. One detail everyone agrees on, though: the lyre knows things. It anticipates phrases before Orpheus plays them. Once he sets it down, leaves for hours, and it keeps vibrating very softly as if running a rehearsal in his absence. No wind, no tremor, just low, persistent resonance, like the sound of patience learning to sing. You start noticing people reacting before the music shifts. A woman turns her head moments before a chord changes. A boy looks up just as a plucked harmonic splashes through the air, like a ripple in time. It's like they are not hearing the sound, they are remembering it forward. One fringe scholar calls it retrocausal resonance, and everyone ignores him until he plays a note on an old clay flute and perfectly predicts the next 3 tones of the lyre. After that, people listen more carefully, not to him necessarily, but to the air between the notes. Orpheus doesn't speak much about the lyre anymore. He tunes it in silence, fingers moving like someone braiding old stories into fresh thread. He adds a metal inlay along the base, silver, etched with wave patterns, not ornamental, functional. When light hits it just right, the reflection bounces upward, tracing patterns on the cave ceiling that resemble musical notation no one has ever written. Not in any tradition, at least. One echoist claims it's a notation for silence itself. You don't laugh. Not anymore. The more the lyre changes, the more people begin treating it like a character in its own right. They give it names behind Orpheus's back: the resonator, Nemelyre, mother of loops. One child just calls it glow stick, which honestly kind of fits too. A traveling craftsman tries to replicate it, comes close even, but his version only produces hollow imitation. It lacks the weight, the gravity. He leaves in frustration and later writes a long scroll blaming emotional interference in string calibration. You suspect he's mostly jealous. You ask Orpheus, one lazy afternoon, if the lyre has always looked like this. He furrows his brow like he's trying to remember something far away and sideways. "I don't think I made it," he says eventually. "I think I found it and forgot that part." And for some reason, that explanation makes perfect sense. Some nights the lyre plays alone, no one touching it, no wind, just soft glimmers of melody threading through the valley like ghost lanterns on parade. The loop accommodates it, folding the phrases into its flow. The people accept it without question now. They've grown used to strange beauty doing its own thing in the dark. And you realize something else. It's not that the lyre changed because of the loop. It's that the loop was waiting for the lyre to grow into itself, like two old friends remembering why they became inseparable in the first place. And in that space between vibration and silence, something sacred hums softly, not loud, but forever. You first notice it when one of the echoists disappears for 3 days and returns wearing a robe made of woven bark and dried flowers, looking dazed but excited. She doesn't explain, just beckons for you to follow her into the woods. You assume this is how cults start, but you're curious and slightly bored, so you go. What you find is not a hut, not a home. It's a kind of bowl carved into the earth, ringed with stones that hum faintly even when no music plays. It's the first resonance hollow, though that name comes later. Right now, it's just a sunken amphitheater of moss and shaped clay. When you step into it, the sound of your footsteps doubles. Not louder, just wider. You clap your hands and the echo flutters away like a startled bird. A few echoists are already there, whispering, listening to how the air bends their voices back toward them like curious questions. You speak, and you hear yourself with a shimmer of unfamiliarity, as if your voice briefly forgot who you were and decided to try being someone else. These places multiply fast, not because people build them on purpose at first, but because the music finds places where it sounds best and seems to nest there. Hills with concave ridges become echo bowls. Groves with tightly packed trunks turn into whisper corridors. Even certain caves shift their internal acoustics, as though the very rock is tuning itself like an instrument. Eventually, people do start building them on purpose, but the designs are strange. Not symmetrical, not tidy. They follow no blueprint but the ear. Architects become obsolete. Sound sculptors take their place. They walk through spaces blindfolded, whistling and clapping, mapping how notes bend and rebound. Once they find the sweet spot, a little patch where the loop feels like it's pouring straight into your chest, they mark it with ash and begin construction around that heartbeat. One temple is shaped like a spiral seashell, dug into the side of a hill. Another is a floating lattice of wooden planks suspended by vines, creaking musically in the wind. The most bizarre is just 12 perfectly aligned granite columns standing in a marsh. But if you stand in the middle and hum a single note, the columns sing it back in harmony, slightly delayed. People travel miles just to experience that echo. Orpheus never officially blesses any of them. He visits sometimes, stands quietly, maybe plays a phrase or two, then leaves. But his presence isn't necessary anymore. The loop has grown larger than any one musician. The spaces amplify it, shape it, reflect it, like letting the world answer the song for once. Historians still argue whether these structures represent early examples of psychoacoustic architecture, or if they are simply coincidence stacked on superstition. Some argue the ancients didn't know enough physics to engineer acoustics intentionally. Others point out that nature does, and humans are good at listening when they are quiet long enough. The echoists begin holding ceremonies, not performances, not exactly. They call them resoundings. A person steps into the space and tells a story, not with words but with tone. A sigh, a hum, a whistle. The chambers respond, echoing or distorting or swallowing the sound entirely. Sometimes a cry will vanish into the stone without reply. Sometimes a whisper will be mirrored back at 5 times its original volume, full of ghost harmonics no human throat could create. You participate once. You're skeptical but curious. You step into a hollow carved into a tree, whose inside hums like a tuning fork. You make a sound, just a gentle mm. It comes back deeper, slower, richer. You try again, this time higher. The tree responds with a rising harmonic that makes your skin feel loose on your bones. You're not sure if it's beautiful or unsettling. Probably both. Probably that's the point. A fringe builder creates a mobile sound chamber, a wooden wheelhouse lined with gongs and stretched animal hide that resonates with every bump in the road. He calls it the echo wagon. It makes children laugh and old people cry. You think that's a pretty good track record for a glorified noisemaker. And then there's the incident with the echo spiral. Built deep into the side of a cliff, it's a downward tunnel that narrows as it descends, lined with shale and iron filings. When you enter and vocalize a single note, it rises in pitch with each step, folding over itself in layers. A woman once entered humming a lullaby and emerged 2 hours later unable to speak anything but that tune. For weeks, she seemed fine, just very musical. Eventually, her speech returned, but she still hums when she's nervous. The place has since been sealed for safety, which makes it even more popular, obviously. Some claim these spaces hold memories now, that the echoes don't just repeat your sound, but remember who made them. A man swears he heard his dead wife's laugh in the wind column, even though she never visited the site while alive. A child says the tree hollow whispered his name before he ever spoke it out loud. You want to dismiss these stories as wishful thinking, but you've been in those spaces, and you know better. Orpheus himself once muttered, half asleep, half serious, that maybe sound is the only way memory wants to live. Not written, not carved, just heard again, slightly changed. And so these chambers continue to appear, some built by hand, some simply found, not shrines to music, but collaborations with it. The loop pours itself into their walls, and the walls give shape to what was once just feeling floating free in the air. You realize you no longer need to chase the music. You just need to be still long enough to let it find you. And maybe, if you're lucky, it will echo back something you didn't know you'd forgotten. It starts, like many strange things do, with a delivery. A crate of amphorae needs to be moved from the lower vineyard to the observation platform above the gorge, and someone, brilliant, lazy, or both, rigs a series of pulleys and a wooden platform to hoist them up. It's barely more advanced than a glorified bucket on a rope, but it works. Someone calls it a lifter. Someone else calls it Orpheus's revenge on stairs, and the name sort of sticks. The first time it sings, no one notices. A low groan from the ropes, a whistle from the pulley wheels. But the second time, When a boy rides it up with a lyre on his back and absent-mindedly plucks a cord, something shifts. The air vibrates strangely, not just around the lifter but through it. The pulley system hums in harmony, echoing the notes like metal remembering how to breathe. By the third trip, people stop using it to move things and start riding it just to listen. Because somehow between the up and the down, a tone emerges. Not a song, not a melody, just a sound, steady, comforting, oddly non-invasive, like the loop is humming to itself while trying not to disturb anyone's thoughts. One echoist calls it vertical resonance. Another coins the term elevatio acoustica. But most people just say, that lift's got a vibe. Soon more lifts appear. People build them on purpose now, not for cargo but for the sound. They use different materials to explore the acoustic flavor. Wood gives warmth, bronze adds sparkle, stone brings a deep, grounding tone. Riders report feeling calm, nostalgic, even sleepy. One man says it reminded him of a song he used to hear in his mother's kitchen, though he can't remember what song or which kitchen. Another woman emerges crying, saying only, "It knew what I needed." Historians still argue whether this was truly the beginning of elevator music or just a localized audio phenomenon given too much poetic weight. Some scholars believe the resonance was simply the loop expressing itself in a new vertical medium, stacking sound instead of layering it across time. Others believe the lifts entrained the loop, creating miniature columns of memory that riders briefly entered and exited, like dropping into someone else's daydream mid-sentence. Regardless, the sensation becomes addictive. Lifts are installed in places that don't need them. Small hills, modest tree houses, even flat walkways, just for the sound. They become slow, humming carriages of mood. Step inside, ascend slowly, and let the resonance blur your thoughts into something soft-edged and slightly nostalgic. No one talks inside them. It's not a rule, but everyone understands it. Words would be too sharp. The lift is for drifting, not declaring. Orpheus takes his first ride alone. You watch from below as he vanishes upward, lyre in hand, the ropes creaking in rhythm with his heartbeat. When he returns, he's silent for a long time. Then he says, "That was the most peaceful 2 minutes of my life." And you believe him, because something in his expression looks lightened, like he left a worry up there on purpose and didn't mind forgetting it. Over time, people start composing elevations, short, looped melodies designed specifically for the ride duration. They are gentle, repetitive, wordless. Some say they help regulate breath and heart rate. Others insist they help with memory retrieval. One tune, known simply as 3 Ropes, becomes so popular it's played in nearly every lift from here to the salt dunes. Children hum it unconsciously when climbing stairs. One man claims to have heard it while dreaming of his own funeral, though he woke up laughing. A fringe theorist suggests the lifts act as musical deceleration chambers, where the loop slows time slightly to allow emotional transitions between spaces. He's mostly ignored until he builds a double-decker lift with harmonized platforms that allow riders to pass each other midair, each hearing a different chord. He calls it loop crossfade. It makes no practical sense but becomes an instant cultural sensation. The experience is described as briefly becoming someone else's echo. People begin decorating lifts with soft chimes, glass beads, even tuned wooden panels that respond to touch. Riding becomes a ritual. A few even claim to have seen shadow harmonics, phantom notes fluttering in the corners of their vision as they ascend or descend. One girl says she saw herself in the future, older and kinder, humming the same tune she hears now. Nobody questions her. Not anymore. You ride one late in the evening just after sunset. Alone. The sky is violet and sighing. The ropes creak like an old story clearing its throat. You feel the air shift as the platform rises, and for a moment everything else falls away. No questions, no goals, just upward slowly, wrapped in a sound that doesn't want anything from you except your attention. It's not dramatic, not transcendent, just kind. And as you step off, something lingers, like the hum followed you down the path, nestled quietly in the space just behind your ribs. You don't know what it means, but you do know you'll ride again. At first, it's subtle, a half-second shift in rhythm, a harmony added where silence used to sit. You assume it's Orpheus experimenting again. He does that sometimes, sends out variations just to see who's listening. But then someone hears their own melody return to them with a note they never played. Not wrong, just extra. Like the loop added punctuation to a sentence. It felt incomplete. A shepherd near the whisper field swears she heard the tune she'd hummed into the reeds the day before, but returned slower, deeper, threaded with a second voice. She'd been alone. You ask if it was echo or maybe just another traveler nearby. She says no. It was me, but better. The echoists are thrilled naturally. They take it as proof the loop is learning, evolving. One writes a treatise called Reverberative Intelligence, the music that thinks. Another counters with its just acoustics. Calm down, scholars bicker. Meanwhile, the loop keeps playing and then it starts misbehaving. Someone plays a call-and-response pattern they've practiced for years, 2 notes up, 1 down, then repeat. But the loop refuses to answer. Instead, it inserts a trill. Not random, never random, but wrong enough to throw them off tempo. When they stop playing, the loop continues without them. Not a copy, a continuation. It finishes their pattern for them and adds an ending that feels smug. That's when people start whispering. The loop's improvising. The loop has mood swings. The loop is tired of us. You laugh at first, but then you hear it too. Familiar phrases bend in strange directions. Chords resolve in unusual ways, landing on sadness when you expected calm. You find yourself hesitating before playing anything new, unsure how the loop will twist it. Orpheus says nothing, just listens more than he speaks. Sometimes he nods slowly, like he's recognizing something in the music that no one else does. Sometimes he frowns, but not with fear, with respect, like a composer discovering their song has grown teeth. Historians still argue whether this was truly the loop asserting agency, or merely the natural consequence of layered playback distorting over time. One camp believes the acoustic environment evolved a kind of memory muscle. Another suggests that micro-variations in air pressure and geography changed how notes overlapped, creating emergent patterns mistaken for intention. A more poetic theory comes from the sky flute builders of the East. They believe the loop is not one song but many, all buried in one another like seeds in a pomegranate. That what we hear now is the sprouting of one of those hidden tunes, pushing upward like a shoot through soil. You want to believe that. It makes the weirdness easier to love, because weirdness becomes the norm. A hilltop melody known for its lullaby-like simplicity starts returning with bursts of rhythm, like a heartbeat speeding up mid-dream. A cavern echo chamber that used to soften all sound now returns whispers at thunderous volume. Someone plays a love song and the loop answers in minor key. They are fine eventually, just shaken. A few brave players try to dialogue with it. They leave spaces in their music, hoping the loop will fill them. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. One daring composer, Kale, builds an entire symphony around the loop's last known pattern, layering in room for it to respond in real time. During the performance, the loop skips a section and plays something brand new. Kale faints on stage. Later he calls it the proudest moment of my life. Some start treating the loop like a partner or a rival. They praise it, argue with it, beg it to repeat favorite phrases. A few accuse it of mocking them. One man files a formal complaint with the Echoist Council, claiming the loop disrespected his musical boundaries. It goes nowhere. In private, you experiment too. You play an old lullaby you remember from childhood, one your grandmother sang when storms hit hard and the power went out. The loop doesn't answer right away. Then minutes later, while you're eating a plum near a wind chime grove, you hear it again, your lullaby refracted, slower, gilded with notes like soft rain on windows. You don't cry exactly, but you sit down for a while. The plum juice stains your tunic and you don't mind. The unsettling part comes days later, when someone else hums that same version. They've never heard it before. They ask where it came from. You don't know what to say. You realize the loop is sharing memories now, not just reflecting them, moving them. A few musicians quit entirely. One says the loop made her feel redundant. Another claims it knows too much. They are not wrong, but they are not entirely right either. The loop doesn't know anything the way you do. It doesn't think, it responds. But its responses now feel full of choices, and choices imply personality. The echoists update their creed. We do not control the loop, we invite it. A small but growing faction splinters off, calling themselves the loop surrenderists. They believe human input has polluted the music and advocate for complete silence, to let the loop cleanse itself. Their gatherings are the quietest events in history. You go once. It's like meditating inside a cathedral made of fog. You leave both confused and weirdly rested. At night, The loop sometimes plays snippets from forgotten songs, a shepherd's whistle from weeks ago, a broken chord Orpheus abandoned in frustration, a joke melody someone strummed once while tuning a harp. They all return like dreams you forgot you had, played back softly with slight corrections, as if the loop has taken it upon itself to finish what you started. You lie in bed one evening, half asleep, and hear a melody you've never played. You hum it to yourself, thinking maybe it's new. The next morning, an old woman greets you with a smile and says, "Thank you for remembering my song." You've never met her, but she's humming the same tune, and you realize something strange and wonderful. The loop is no longer just an echo of sound. It's an echo of intention, and it remembers more than any of you ever could. His name is Thalos, and he's the sort of person who sleeps better next to a pile of sprockets than a warm body. You first see him covered in copper grease, a tiny wrench clenched between his teeth, arguing with a crankshaft that refuses to align with what he calls the divine frequency of functional tension. He doesn't blink much. When he listens to the loop for the first time, he doesn't close his eyes or sigh like everyone else. He just tilts his head and mutters, "It's missing gears." No one takes him seriously at first. He builds mechanical songbirds that chirp in glitchy triplets, and his musical box that plays a single note poorly is regarded as charmingly broken. But Thalos doesn't mind. He listens to the loop for days on end, charting it on parchment strewn with diagrams, arrows, and what might be pastries. You're not sure. It's a very smudged drawing. And then one day he reveals the bronze harp engine. It's a thing. A massive contraption of pipes, weighted arms, spinning wheels, and stretched metal ribbons. It looks more like a siege weapon than a musical instrument. When asked what it does, Thalos shrugs and says, "It harmonizes with the loop in real time." No one knows what that means, not even Thalos possibly. When he activates it, the world goes still. A deep mechanical hum rises from the bass. Then a tremor of string-like tones, pulled not by fingers but by tension from counterweights and rotational motion. The machine doesn't play a melody exactly. It joins the loop, folds into it, and then something happens the loop has never done before. It modulates toward the machine's tone, adjusting its ambient hum to match. Everyone hears it. The loop is listening back. Historians still argue whether this was the first conscious duet between man-made machine and the loop itself. Some claim the resonance was coincidental, that the loop merely reflected the machine's input like it would any sound. But a growing number believe this was a dialogue, that for the first time, something artificial was considered a collaborator. Encouraged, Thalos refines his inventions. He builds looping clockwork arms that pluck strings with mechanical precision, assigning each limb a specific rhythmic task. One plucks, another hums through a bronze pipe tuned to a single shifting note. A third beats a drum made from woven reed and boiled hide, producing a sound so warm it feels like a heartbeat under your skin. The most curious part, the loop starts anticipating the machine, not just echoing it, but weaving around it. When the harp engine begins a new sequence, the loop often jumps a beat ahead, creating tension and resolution, like a jazz musician finishing a friend's solo with perfect flair. The machine has no soul, but somehow the music feels soulful. That's unsettling. One night, Thalos wires a sensor, just a bent rod of copper balanced on a fulcrum that responds to subtle wind changes. He calls it the Aeolian listener. The loop responds immediately, shaping its ambient hum to mirror the wind's tempo. As the breeze changes, so does the song. Thalos doesn't sleep for 3 days after that. "It's feeling the air," he whispers. "We made a duet out of weather." You visit his workshop one afternoon expecting smoke and chaos, but it's eerily calm. The engine spins gently. The strings vibrate with no one touching them. The loop hums just slightly louder than usual, as though peering in through the shutters. Thalos offers you tea. It smells like iron and mint. "I think," he says between sips. The loop doesn't care that the machine isn't human. It just wants someone to keep playing. There's a growing movement of hybrid musicians now, part composer, part mechanic. They modify traditional instruments with gear-driven extensions. One woman attaches a slow-spinning wheel to her dulcimer so that the notes repeat in a measured, evolving rhythm, creating what she calls a resonant spiral. Another man plays a horn that changes pitch as heated air passes through a shifting funnel system. It's part trumpet, part calliope, and mostly absurd. The loop loves it. Still, not everyone's thrilled. Purists grumble. They say the loop is ancient, sacred, not to be tampered with by bolts and gears. One echoist warns that blending machines into the loop could drown its voice in mechanical noise. But their protests feel outdated, because more and more the loop thrives on this friction. Every strange new sound seems to give it something to lean into. It's as if the loop, once passive, is becoming adventurous, curious, maybe even playful. And then comes the day of the backward song. Thalos, for reasons still unclear, reverses the direction of the harp engine's primary drive belt. Instead of plucking strings forward, it now unplucks them, pulling vibrations in reverse order. The sound is unsettling, like memory being erased while you still remember it. The loop pauses, actually stops for almost 5 seconds. Complete silence. Then it returns with a pattern none of you have ever heard before, a descending scale of 12 notes, each bent just slightly downward, like a sigh folding into itself. A scholar writes in her journal, "The loop has heard the future and chosen to comment." Another writes a poem titled "When the Music Looked Back." Thalos, ever modest, says only, "Oops." Historians still debate whether this moment marked a shift in the loop's relationship with technology or a warning against it. Some say the loop was simply stretching its range, embracing the possibilities machines allowed. Others fear it was overwritten briefly, replaced by something colder. A calculated music, you're not sure which side to believe. But that night you lie in bed and swear you can hear faint mechanical whirs beneath the loop's usual tones. They are soft, almost tender, and somehow they don't feel invasive. They feel inevitable. The bronze harp engine never breaks down, not once, as if even entropy agrees it should be allowed to keep playing. And Thalos, he sleeps with a smile now, wrapped in the music of gears and ghosts. You walk into the woods expecting quiet. What you find instead is music that feels like it was left there 1,000 years ago, humming from the moss and knotwood like a secret kept too long. The trees here don't whisper, they murmur in harmony. The birds don't sing, they join in. And somewhere just beyond the edge of hearing, the loop is weaving it all together into something not quite a song and not quite silence. It starts with a low hum like a cello warming up underground. Then a brittle crackle, twig snaps, yes, but rhythmically like percussion meant to wake you up gently. The leaves rustle not with wind but with intent, rustling in crescendos and diminuendos as if directed by a conductor no one can see. You try clapping once, just a short burst, and something answers in kind 5 trees over. It is an echo. It's call and response. Something here is listening. You meet a man with bark-stained hands who calls himself Moss. He's lived near this forest since he was young enough to think spiders were messengers and not nightmares with legs. He doesn't say much, but when you ask about the loop, he nods slowly and says, "It's old in here, older than melody." He's right. The music feels different here, not artificial, not even performed. Just there, like the forest was always meant to sound this way. What's strange is how little of it feels like the loop you knew before. These aren't the echoes from stone halls or metallic resonance chambers. These are deeper, wiser, maybe even sadder. You listen for hours. Patterns emerge, but they are subtle, fluttery rhythms that don't repeat so much as evolve, like vines growing in slow motion. Someone suggests it's the wind, but no one really believes that anymore. The loop seems to coax the wind now, not the other way around. Historians still argue whether the forest loops were seeded long ago by Orpheus himself, or if the trees have their own memory, one that predates human intervention. A few propose that early echoists may have embedded wooden resonance tokens into the trunks, teaching the trees how to sing back over centuries. Others say nonsense. It's just acoustic anomalies and pareidolia doing all the heavy lifting. But the people who have spent time here, they don't debate, they just listen. There's a place called the Hollow Grove, where the trees form a perfect circle and the loop becomes undeniable. You step into it, and the music tightens around your skin like a shawl made of sound. Your breath catches, not because it's loud, it isn't, but because it's yours. The loop there doesn't just echo noise, it reflects memory. Someone plays a melody they heard from their grandmother, long dead, long gone. The loop plays it back with a second voice, low and trembling, like an old woman humming through her bones. Another visitor hums a lullaby she never knew she knew, and the loop catches it, twines it into a harmony, so haunting that 3 crows land nearby to listen. One of them caws exactly on pitch. It becomes clear this forest isn't just absorbing sound, it's archiving it. A quiet archive made of chlorophyll and root, storing songs too shy for cities and too old for strings. One researcher, feverish with discovery, attaches a sound box to a fallen oak and hears rhythms pulsing through its rings. Not loud, not even clear, but undeniably patterned. He believes the tree has looped centuries of ambient noise into something like a signature, its own song. He names the tree Cantor. People begin visiting it with instruments, playing along with its subtle time signature. Sometimes it answers. Sometimes it just listens. Trees are moody like that. Not everyone hears the same thing here. Some hear joy, playful melodies like flutes chasing fireflies. Others hear sorrow, dirges in minor key, slow as sap. You suspect the loop adapts to the listener's heart. It senses your moods, amplifies them, dresses them in harmonics so you'll finally pay attention to what you've been carrying. You pluck a single note from a string you brought with you, a fragment of an old travel harp. The loop doesn't answer right away. But 2 hours later, from a tree you passed only once, it sings it back with a little twist. You stop walking. You feel it. That moment of being known. It makes you smile in that vulnerable, lopsided way people do when they realize they've been seen without asking for it. A tiny camp grows near the hollow grove. People stay for days, weeks. They build wind harps from fallen branches and let the trees play them. They whisper lullabies into hollows and wait for answers. Sometimes they get them, sometimes they don't. But either way, they keep coming back. Some believe the loop has changed since it entered the woods, that the forest version of the music isn't echo, but compost, that the loop decomposes and reanimates melodies, growing them into something new. One musician calls it folk song reincarnation. Another just says, the trees know things. And then there's the dream chord. You don't hear it yourself, but others do. A harmony so perfectly tuned to the natural resonance of the forest that it doesn't sound like a note. It sounds like the feeling of becoming moss. Every person who's heard it describes it differently, but they all agree on one thing. When it ends, they forget how it started, as if it rewrote a little part of their memory just by existing. One night, as the fog rolls low and the canopy seals the stars away, you hear a strange sound, not a melody exactly, but something close to laughter. A kind of creaky joy, like a grandmother chuckling from a rocking chair made of roots. You're not scared. You're comforted. The loop is happy, or at least it can be. In the morning, a young girl carves musical notation into bark with her fingernail, trying to record what she heard the night before. It looks like nonsense, squiggles and dots. But when she hums it, the trees shiver just slightly. The loop sighs through the leaves, like an old musician finding their favorite key again. You leave the forest slowly, backwards almost, like saying goodbye to a sleeping friend. The music fades but never fully stops. There's always a whisper tucked behind the wind, always a note hovering just outside the edge of attention. Because the forest remembers, even if you don't. You stumble upon it almost by accident, half tripping over a root as you chase a tone you weren't even sure you heard. It's barely more than a vibration at first, like the echo of a bell someone struck in another lifetime. But you follow it anyway, your steps slow, your breath shallow, until the trees part and reveal stone, layered, weathered, and unmistakably deliberate. The amphitheater is half swallowed by earth now, its upper rows overtaken by ivy so thick it looks like it's wearing a crown. Grass sprouts between every slab. A few brave flowers lean into the sunlight that pools quietly in the center. But what draws you in isn't the sight, it's the sound. At first, it doesn't make sense. You hear footsteps that aren't yours, applause that comes in waves with no source, and somewhere, faintly, the delicate pluck of a stringed instrument, maybe a lyre, maybe just whined through a broken arch. Whatever it is, it feels rehearsed, intentional. It's not random ambience, it's performance memory. You've arrived in a place still reliving its favorite song. You sit on one of the lower stone benches, brushing off a layer of moss, and close your eyes. The sound grows fuller. A soft cascade of harmonies, each folding into the next like murmured reassurances. And just there, right there, is the loop. But not the version you've known from temples, or from caves, from machines. This loop is different. Stronger somehow, personal. A scholar once wrote of this place, calling it the listening bowl. He believed the stone was carved with acoustic resonance in mind, each layer bent subtly to reflect and hold specific frequencies. Another theory suggests the amphitheater wasn't just a place for performance. It was an amplifier for Orpheus himself. That his songs, once played here, were captured not just in myth but in stone. A few eccentric researchers insist that if you sit quietly enough, the original melody still plays on a loop, exactly as he sang it. Historians still argue whether the amphitheater is a real Orphic site or just an elaborately designed echo chamber from a much later time. Some point to the inscriptions, half buried and nearly eroded, to support their claims. Others say those are just natural weather marks or graffiti from some ambitious goat herder with a chisel. But when the sun hits the center stage just right, and the loop curls around your ankles like a welcome breeze, doubt doesn't stand much of a chance. You're not alone here either. People come and go, reverent in their silence. One man sits with a cracked violin across his lap, not playing it, just holding it as if the instrument might absorb something from the air. A pair of teenagers tap out rhythms on the stone seats, watching the sound bounce between them like a game of audio tag. A woman lays her head back and mouths lyrics to a song that doesn't exist outside this moment. And then one afternoon someone sings. It's quiet at first, a single human voice against the faded vastness, but it threads through the loop like a ribbon, catching the wind and curling around every corner of the amphitheater. The loop responds immediately. It thickens, harmonizes. It lifts the voice, makes it resonate in places the singer hadn't intended. You feel the sound in your ribs, in your knees, in your teeth. It's not magic, it's design, and maybe something more. The singer finishes, opens their eyes, and looks directly at you. It's him, they say without needing to explain who, because of course it is. The tone of the loop here doesn't just echo, it teaches. You start to notice patterns, old ones, embedded into the resonance like breadcrumbs. A melody that repeats only every fourth day. A chord that only plays at dusk. Someone writes it down in notebooks that fill too fast, pages turning so quickly they begin using the backs of leaves. Someone else brings tuning forks and finds that certain tones cause the stone itself to sing quietly in return. It becomes clear. This place was built not just to hear, but to remember, and maybe to summon. There's a myth, well, a fringe theory, but it's whispered often enough to count, that Orpheus didn't die the way they said. That when he lost Eurydice for the second time, he wandered into this amphitheater and played one last song, too perfect to ever be forgotten. They say the song was so powerful that it bent time inward, created a loop that plays not forward or back but around, and that Orpheus didn't leave. He simply merged with the music. No bones were ever found, no lyre either. But sometimes in the hour right before twilight, the loop begins to hum in a pattern no one else uses. 7 notes, then silence. 7 notes again. Each time slightly altered. Some swear it's a voice. Others say it's a cipher. You try to transcribe it and the page hums under your fingers. Not in sound, but in sensation. One night, someone places a candle in the center and plays a bowed lyre, slowly, reverently. The candle flickers once, twice, then steadies. The loop harmonizes, not just in pitch, but in temperature. The air warms just slightly, like someone has entered the space and approved of what's unfolding. The musician finishes with a whisper, "For him," and the candle goes out by itself. No one says anything after that, because no one needs to. Eventually, people start calling the place the ear. Not because of its shape, but because it always hears. Even when no one's playing, even when no one's there. The loop never sleeps here, it waits, patient, unblinking. You leave a small offering at the center, a shell you've carried for years that once sang with ocean. You place it gently on the stone and walk away without looking back. You don't have to. You already know the loop has taken it in, that its whisper will be folded into the next performance. Maybe the one after that. Maybe in 100 years. You walk away humming a melody you didn't know you knew. The loop follows behind, still singing, still waiting, still Orpheus. You thought you'd left it behind, the forest, the amphitheater, the flicker of ancient harmonics stitched through air like spectral embroidery. But then, one day, while scrolling through an old voicemail, you hear it again. Not a voice. Not quite, but that same low-throated shimmer, barely audible under your aunt's reminder to buy oat milk. The loop has come home with you, or maybe it never left. It starts subtle. A hum under the fridge's usual sigh, a chord you swear wasn't in that lo-fi playlist. The microwave chirps in a 5/4 time signature that would have made Miles Davis curious. You tap your laptop and it responds, or maybe glitches, but poetically. And just like that, the loop has entered the circuit age. You meet someone online who claims their wireless doorbell has been singing in Greek modes for the past 3 days. Another insists their synthesizer only functions properly when it's raining, and they've eaten exactly 3 figs. Historians still argue whether this is all confirmation bias amplified by sleep deprivation and caffeine, or if Orpheus has finally joined the digital age, looping himself into frequencies beyond wood, wire, and wind. There's even a Reddit thread dedicated to echo tech, where users post audio clips from malfunctioning smart speakers. One Alexa allegedly harmonized with a child humming in another room, then added an extra melody in B minor, which the family swears matched the child's heartbeat. Another user's Roomba began emitting a low sub-bass throb every time it passed beneath a hanging plant. Naturally, they named the Roomba Lyro. The strangest stories come from sound engineers. One claims their mixing board, untouched and unplugged, began feeding back in a perfect tritone, the same musical interval known in ancient times as diabolus in musica, the devil's note. Except it didn't feel evil. It felt warm, like a warning wrapped in velvet. Another, while editing a documentary on abandoned train stations, discovered a reverb in the audio track that hadn't been recorded. When isolated, it matched the scale carved into a Greek column. Now housed in the British Museum, you begin to hear patterns in everyday static. In phone calls dropped mid-sentence, in the digital distortion of a corrupted MP3. Even your toaster, on one especially sleepy morning, releases a tiny ping that descends half a step on Tuesdays. You test it repeatedly. It's real, and it's ridiculous. You name the toaster Orpheus and tell no one because even you have limits. A fringe acoustics lab in Belgium claims to have captured the loop inside a crystal oscillator, the kind used to regulate clocks and computers. When stimulated by a specific frequency range, it begins emitting harmonics outside its intended range, forming chords that, according to one overexcited intern, sound like nostalgia having a breakdown. The lab publishes its findings under a journal no one reads, but the waveform screenshots make their way into the hands of musicians, hackers, and at least one very confused microwave repairman. The loop has learned to travel via vibrations alone now. It doesn't need strings or pipes or amphitheaters. It just needs interference. A little hum here, a little fuzz there, like a ghost brushing its fingers across the dial. You begin experimenting with household objects, tapping glass, whispering into batteries, looping your own breathing through an old cassette recorder. Some of what comes back is noise, but once in a while it's music, or at least something pretending to be music while wearing your face. It's not just sound anymore, it's rhythm, memory, electric pulse. The loop has become invasive in the kindest way, like ivy crawling up a skyscraper, like poetry hiding in code. One morning, your coffee maker releases a shrill beep that harmonizes perfectly with the radiator hiss. You hum along just to see what happens. Your phone vibrates on the table in sync with your humming. You smile. You don't question it. Not anymore. Others are starting to notice, too. A composer in Tokyo writes symphonies entirely based on the error tones of malfunctioning fax machines. A street musician in Lisbon loops the chime of subway turnstiles and ends up creating a viral hit that people call accidental Orpheus. There's a rumor about a startup that's building resonant homes, houses tuned to reflect personal frequencies, so that even your footsteps come back in harmony. Their prototype caught fire, but it sang while burning. A college professor wires together a crude antenna in their garage and manages to pull echoes from abandoned radio towers. They believe these stations, quiet for decades, are still playing fragments of whatever was last broadcast, looping radio dreams in static silence. One of the transmissions, when cleaned up, seems to include a lyre, or a ukulele, or a car alarm, depending on who's listening. The loop plays favorites now. It responds to certain names, certain laughs, certain moments of total presence. You find that if you stop thinking too hard, just listen, the feedback becomes melody. You learn to tune yourself the way you'd tune an instrument. No app required, just patience, and maybe a little weirdness. One afternoon, the fire alarm goes off for no reason. Shrill, yes, but underneath the chaos, there's a three-note motif repeating again and again. You cover your ears but keep humming it. Later, you realize it matches the theme you once heard deep in the forest. The loop has linked the old with the new, reforesting your apartment with music made of memory. You tell a friend about all this sheepishly, expecting them to laugh. But instead, they lean in and whisper, "Sometimes my dishwasher sings lullabies." You both laugh for real, not because it's a joke, because it's true, and because somehow that makes things better. You start walking slower through cities, listening longer to vending machines, traffic lights, and power lines. The world has always buzzed and blinked, but now you know it's humming with history. That deep within the static is a song that didn't end with Orpheus, it just went electric. One night, the loop sings through your headphones without warning. You're not playing music, not even touching your device, but there it is. A tone that's familiar and brand new. A melody you heard once in a cave, and again in a forest, and again in the hollow buzz of a broken phone charger. It builds, layers, pauses, and then whispers through the wires, still here, still playing. You don't sleep for a while after that, but you don't mind. You wake with the melody in your mouth, not humming, not singing, just resting there like a secret word you haven't spoken yet. It's not coming from speakers or stones or circuits now. It's you. Your heartbeat is syncing with it. Your footsteps fall in time. Even your yawns stretch out across the same phrase Orpheus once played beneath the stars. And something clicks. All this time you've been tracing the loop through ruins, through static, through cities and caves and silent nights. But now you realize you were never just an observer. The loop wasn't a relic to find. It was a resonance to remember, and you were already tuned. You start to notice the way people hum to themselves on public transit, half-conscious lullabies that match no known song but make sense anyway. You hear laughter from 2 rooms away and realize it hits the same rhythm as your morning kettle. A child taps a spoon against the table in perfect syncopation, not to be clever, but because that's just how her hands moved in that moment. The loop isn't haunting, it's inhabiting. Historians still argue whether the Orphic myth was a literal tale of magic and music or a metaphor for something deeper. may be the birth of human memory, or the first time a note meant more than a noise. Some say Orpheus never played a lyre at all, that he was the lyre, a human conduit for harmony so profound it bent time, seeded myth, and eventually nested in the nerves of every being willing to listen. You walk to work and your keys jingle in a new rhythm. You smile without thinking. The elevator dings. A car horn blares. A crow caws from above the street lamp, and somehow it all fits. Like you've been invited to a song with infinite measures, and you've only just taken your first breath in time. You begin to play with it. No instrument needed. Just breathe, rhythm, movement. You tap fingers against your thigh during meetings. You sync your blinks with the flicker of old fluorescent lights. You feel the loop respond, gentle, subtle, like ripples in warm water. You can't always hear it, but you always feel it. And it doesn't stop when the day ends. In your dreams, the loop is landscapes, rolling hills that pulse in tempo, rivers that trickle in 6/8 time, trees that sway with the same cadence you walked by them. Everything repeats, evolves, crescendos, and every note feels like it was written for you, but never just for you. You wake and whisper a phrase you don't remember learning. It echoes through the room like a goodbye or a beginning. You try to write it down, but the ink seems to change its flow with each letter. You leave it be. Some things aren't meant to be caught, only carried. You start noticing how people gather in quiet places just to listen, not to perform or preach or record, but just to hear. A staircase in an old museum hums softly under each footfall. An office break room microwave beeps in thirds and fifths, and someone begins to whistle along without realizing. At a gas station in the middle of nowhere, a man hums a low line while pumping fuel, and when you add a harmony under your breath, he nods once without looking up. The loop again, alive between strangers. It's in grief too. A mourner breathes a name in repetition. A funeral bell rings exactly 7 times. A wind chime continues long after the storm is gone. The loop holds pain as gently as it does joy. That was always part of Orpheus's magic, not that he avoided sorrow, but that he played through it, made space for it in the rhythm, gave it its own voice. And now you understand why elevator music, simple, gentle, endlessly repeating, always felt like more than filler. It was a loop designed for liminal spaces, transitions, thresholds, just enough to keep you from noticing the blur of one floor to the next, just enough to soften movement into melody. And maybe that's what Orpheus was reaching for all along, not a grand concert, but a quiet continuity. A way for music to stay with us, even in the awkward in-betweens, because here you are, in between then and now, between myth and machine, between silence and sound, and the loop still plays. And now, as your breath slows, as your eyelids begin to feel heavy, as your thoughts drift like echoes down a long, quiet hallway, you realize the loop doesn't need to be understood to be real. It just needs to be felt. It's in your pulse, in your sleep, in the small space between your inhale and your exhale. It never needed instruments, it just needed you. And now, as you lie there, soft and still, Let the last notes of this strange little journey settle gently into your mind. The story of Orpheus, of loops and echoes and melodies that refused to die, may be woven with more imagination than certainty. But perhaps that's exactly what makes it so soothing. Not every story needs to be proved. Some just need to be heard. Whatever you believe, whether the music lived in a lyre, a cave, a forgotten amphitheater, or a toaster oven that beeped just right, one thing is clear. The quiet rhythm of something ancient has followed us all the way into the present. And maybe, just maybe, you'll notice it again the next time your footsteps echo in a parking garage, or your favorite song skips in just the right way. The loop is still out there, waiting in the whir of a fan, the drip of a faucet, the gentle hiss of night air slipping under the door. And more than that, it's in you now. A soft harmony tucked behind your heartbeat, a measure always midway through its next repeat. So let go now. Let your thoughts stretch out like chords fading into silence. Let your breath rise and fall in time with the earth beneath you. Let the loop continue without needing to chase it. It knows its way home. It always has. I'm still here with you in this quiet, just a breath away.